Gray, a piece of animation and manga history that I feel has been slightly left behind. I can't find a DVD or Blu-ray for it. There's a Laserdisc, but that's Japan only. A sealed VHS can go for below $25. Yet, I remember this anime so fondly. It's dark and gritty. It has a brutal plot. It's immediately atmospheric from the first moment. And you can watch it fully on YouTube, where it's free and has over 200,000 views. But I don't think I come across people talking about it often, and I'm not sure why. It seems the American licensing has expired for both the manga and the anime long ago, so if you have the capability, go watch it. Hell, it's available to read for free if you just search for it on the Internet Archive. However, as with most things, I'm here to present you the completish story of both the anime and the manga, so if you're stuck at work, in the car, or just like the way I present things, stick around and we'll go through it. Yoshihisha Tagami, the mangaka behind the source material, has quite a few works to his name, but it doesn't seem like, at least in the West, that they really ever gained much popularity. The only other work you can find to be adapted into animation is Karuizawa Syndrome, but the only other literary works you'll find for purchase in English are Hirobi and Frontierline, both of which I will admit I haven't spent any time with. Yet, Gray has a special place in my heart, and because of this we're covering it. The director of the anime, Satoshi Dazaki, once again has many works under his belt as well, but I'll admit my ignorance in the prominence of most of them, with the exception of Riki-Oh, Mad Bull 34, the first Urusei Yatsura OVA, Inaba the Dreammaker, and the final chapter, though one of my personal favorites is They Were 11. That last one being something that I would love to cover, but interestingly enough, outside of two very small scenes that I can recall, and a single conversation taking place at a different location than in the manga, it's an extremely faithful adaptation of the source material. There are a few animations like that. I'd like to cover them, but there's almost no difference between the source and the adaptation to speak about. Maybe I'll do a video over my favorite accurate adaptations sometime, or maybe I'll just cover them anyways. There are 3 writers for the film version of Gray, including Dazaki himself. The first of which I would like to talk about is Yasushi Hirano. The man definitely has some good stuff, having worked on part of Lupin the Third, Dirty Pair, the first Vampire Hunter D film from 1985, City Hunter, and a few episodes here or there on some popular IPs over the years. The other writer, Katsumi Koide, seems to have worked hand in hand with Dazaki on quite a few projects, including the aforementioned They Were 11, Inaba the Dreammaker, Mad Bull 34, and Riki-Oh. But a couple on the list that don't involve Dazaki are pieces I also love. We have Burn Up Excess and Legend of the Galactic Heroes Gaiden, Golden Wings. Of course, this property would not exist without the manga, which first premiered in issue number 1 of Monthly Shonen Captain, February of 1985, and it ran until September of 1986. We've talked about Monthly Shonen Captain briefly in the Armitage video, as it was also the home for the Armitage the Third manga, and I stand by that it had some damn good properties in it. Over the year of 1986, Shonen Captain Comics would release volumes 1, 2, and 3, with the final volume releasing on December 20th. Also in December of 1986, the film Gray Digital Target would release in Japan. And, with this being the case, the film must have been in production long before the conclusion of the manga series. It's unclear how much involvement Tagami had, but it is reported that he expressed some dissatisfaction at the clear differences between his work and the film. Dazaki saw this as a youth story and didn't want to focus heavily on battle elements for that reason. This also would have led to a much higher strain on animation. However, Tagami's manga focuses heavily on battles and loss. By 1994, Shonen Captain Comics would adopt a 2-volume format for the manga, and Viz Media would publish the English translation in 1997, the same year that they also released the film in English in collaboration with Orion Home Video. For the manga, Viz would first release it as 8 individual issues, one of which was forwarded by Harlan Ellison. They later printed it in the 2-volume format titled Perfect Collection. So what are the differences? Well, we'll get there when we get there. But I will say that the film is a fairly faithful adaptation of the source material through the majority of Volume 1 of the manga, with some small changes, mostly following the plot but leaving out some battles and conversation, adding and subtracting characters. However, towards the middle of the first volume, things start to change ever so slightly, and by Volume 2, while somewhat similar in plot, it's vastly different in most aspects. Additionally, the main concept and lore are preserved for the most part, but there seems to be much more information in the manga, and it's delivered in a more direct way. I just don't see why it wasn't included in the film. Overall, though, my biggest complaint has to be the changes to the story. Why follow it as faithfully as they did, only to deviate so heavily by the second half? Both the film and the manga title chapters as approaches, and I'll be following this naming scheme throughout the duration of this video. Additionally, because the first half of the film is as faithful as it is to the first half of the original material, outside of the small rearrangement of when certain flashbacks happen, I'll be covering the dialogue from the film fairly heavily, so that when we get to the manga, what the film covers can almost be breezed through until we get to the real changes. I'll be fully transparent and tell you that I got behind schedule when making this video, so covering the script of the movie so heavily is going to occasionally cause some small sync issues between what I say and what you see on screen during the anime portion. My apologies in advance. If you're new, I basically present an audiobook-like experience of the anime and manga as we go through them with clips and panels on screen. As with all things I've covered so far, graphic content is ahead. With all of that out of the way, fasten your seatbelts, we're taking off now. We are greeted with text telling us that the year is 2588, and immediately after that, greeted with the sun beating down on the barren land of dunes and rocks as a cloaked man in a helmet walks through this desert. Calls go out over the radio asking for the status of a squad that is MIA and requesting that a vehicle known as a walker return to town, but a man named Red says he will wait just a little longer. Inside of the vehicle, Red asks his driver, Cricket, if he's picking up anything, and a single man appears on their console, cresting a hill, identifying him as TFA 404953, Class C. Red excitedly exclaims that it's Gray, and as he strides towards the walker, the title screen comes up. Approach 1. Town 303. A towering city behind him, Gray drives a red dune buggy into a decrepit town. Close by, 2 men are beating up a young boy. They rough him up pretty good before throwing him into a door, which he slumps against before sliding to the ground, declaring that he has to do better than sorry when he bumps into troopers. They put their life on the line. They are better than people like him. Gray pulls up and begins to ascend the steps to the door the boy is against. He thrusts the door open, knocking the boy out of the way before he passes out on a bed inside. In the towering city, a squad of troopers, Commander Hawk, Nova, Sky, Leo, Turris, and Tim, are receiving their orders from a large computer known as the Little Mama on where they are going to fight. Additionally, they had a request for replacement personnel, and Gray has been added to their team. A bald cyborg sits in front of the large computer and asks if they have questions, and Nova asks if Gray is the Gray. The cyborg smiles, and the squad recalls what they know of him. Known as the Gray Death, he made Class C after only 13 fights. Out of 9 of them, Gray was the only one to return, but the cyborg corrects them, make it 10. Gray just returned from his 14th fight, and once again, he was the only survivor. Hawk states that he requested 2 replacements, but the cyborg, addressed as Common Rope, says they can't spare manpower, and Gray can do the work of 5 Class E troopers. Naturally, Nova asks where he is, and well, Gray is at the factory, walking through an aisle between tanks with Red, who asks where he's headed this time. The next lines casually show how expansive this war is, because Gray is heading to Western America, and Red is heading to Africa. Gray only has 680 credits to get to Class B, meaning he made 290 on the last assignment. Red whistles at this, but Gray says he just doesn't want to die. Kill all your enemies if you want to survive. That's the way that Red taught him. He agrees that he supposes he did teach him that, and asks if Gray makes it to Class B if he'll consider becoming an inspector, like him. It takes longer to make Class A, but you don't have to worry about dying. Just drop off troops in a DMZ and wait for them to return. As they make it outside, an old man pulls up in a Jeep with a turret on it for Gray. Try to return it in one piece this time. And Gray replies that he can take that up with the enemy before bidding farewell and heading out. While driving, he has a flashback to being in a dingy apartment, and Red setting in front of him the signature helmet with the word "lips" on it that he now wears, uttering only the words, "She's dead," before it is revealed that there are 2 bullet holes right at the temple. Red leaves and closes the door behind him, but he stops for a moment on the steps, only to hear Gray scream from inside. Approach 2. Area 807. In the desert once again, Nova counts the enemy battalion through binoculars: 17 self-propelled guns, 1 light tank, and 3 fuel trucks. Sky, full of confidence on his motorcycle, says that they can wipe them out in one go and be done, to which Gray asks, who's gonna do that? Call him crazy, but surviving should take top priority. But Tim asks Gray, who says they're going to die? The enemy would never be able to keep up with his Jeep. Leo stands atop the tank and tells Gray to draw the enemy in to about 1,200 meters. There'll be no match, and the hull can take just about anything outside of 800 meters. Once again, though, Gray has a retort. Who's going to drive the Jeep? Nova responds that it's his Jeep, but Gray says that it's his life, too. Sky begins to laugh. Death? Gray's just a coward. And with a smile, Gray asks, who says they can't use Sky's bike as a decoy? Before the conversation can progress any further, Turris pops out of the tank and says that the enemy has deployed a bee, a type of small drone shaped like an orb. Everyone mounts up inside the tank except Sky and Gray, who are directed by Hawk from atop the tank to attack the enemy from both sides and break them up. They head out, and Sky tells Gray to go right while he goes left, but Gray immediately deviates left while Sky accuses him of chickening out. A good fight is put up. Sky throws grenades, destroying some of the enemy tanks, and his squad's tank takes out a few vehicles as well. But in his overconfidence, Sky ends up right in front of an enemy tank that takes him out with machine gun fire. The squad back in their tank see Sky go down. Panic ensues. The enemy is faster and doesn't seem to end, and to their surprise, one has made it behind them. The enemy tank levels its main cannon, but Gray comes over the hill in his Jeep behind them and takes it out with his turret and a grenade before rushing into battle. We cut to a campfire at night. What remains of the crew sit around tallying the kills and credits, dreaming of the end goal, Class A, becoming a citizen. Tim cozies up to Gray, fawning over him about his kills, and beginning to rub his thigh. Gray removes his hand and tells the squad that the enemy bee is still functional. They're counting their chickens too early. With a serious face, Hawk asks why Gray ignored his orders. After all, he is the commander. But Gray tells him that he doesn't listen to stupid orders that get him killed. Though he is the commander, they are both Class C, so he is under no obligation to obey. But bad news. Gray pulls out an OTF knife and throws it, surprising Nova as it zips past her head, nailing the bee. No sooner have they had an opportunity to inspect it than the enemy shows up. Everyone disperses to their respective vehicles, but a shot comes in that destroys the tank. Gray takes on the oncoming enemy, weaving amongst the dunes and between the tanks while avoiding blasts. He tosses grenades, taking out the tanks before spotting 3 oncoming fuel trucks. He grabs his rifle and jumps out of the Jeep as it speeds off and crashes into the 3 trucks, destroying them totally. Gray makes his way back to what remains of the squad. Nova is holding Turris in her arms on the ground, and Leo is also injured. Tim and Hawk were killed in the blast. 2 tanks and the command truck got away. Nova pleads with Turris to say something, but Gray tells her to stand aside. Don't make her suffer. It won't pay off in the long run. He then shoots her in the head. Nova screams that she was still alive, but Gray ignores her and takes a gun from the body, handing it to Nova. The dead don't need weapons. Leo stands up and says that he can continue, but he's lost an eye and seems pretty banged up. Nova pleads that they can't leave Turris like this, and Gray tells her that he won't become a corpse by burying one, and Leo sides with him, so they move out. Later, the trio sit by a fire as Nova begins to rant about how she can see that Gray survived all this time only because he's a coward. Leo tries to tell her that Gray is the only reason they are alive and tries to apologize for Nova, but Gray says she's right. He is a coward, and he thinks back to himself sitting in that dingy apartment. They then switch to how they're going to get back. The evac zone is 1,000 kilometers from where they are. They only have 210 hours to make it there. Gray has a plan. They'll steal the enemy's tanks. How? He says he'll ask him on a date, using the bee that he is currently tinkering with. Leo says the ruins nearby would be the best spot, and Gray agrees. In the city ruins, the modified bee floats in the road, and they set up for their ambush. Nova and Gray both put on a monocle used for combat targeting and detection, and the tanks roll in. They stop, and a commander emerges from the top of one of the tanks, while 3 men go to check out the bee. Nova steps out for the ambush, but rocks underneath her feet give her away, and the group of troopers begin firing on her position as she retreats to cover. The jig is up. Gray rushes out and grabs the attention of the commander before shooting him in the head. The troopers turn their attention to him as he bashes the driver and drops a grenade into the cockpit of a tank. Nova rains down shots from above, and Leo tosses grenades from his elevated position, also managing to take out some of the troopers. Gray tries to run for cover, but not quick enough, as one of the tank gunners manages to strike him, and as the tank rolls towards him, Leo kamikazes the tank from above, successfully destroying it, but himself also. Both Gray and Nova cry out, but there's nothing that can be done. Unlike before, Gray says that he would like to bury Leo, but there's probably not much left. Nova is suddenly stunned. They are flanked by scavengers. The Resistance. Most of them ex-troopers. They don't seem to want to attack, but it's best not to provoke. Gray tells Nova to start the remaining tank and joins her as soon as it is started, and they get out of there. Approach 3. Interval. Back in Town 303, the little mama is reading off to Gray and Nova the kills and credits they are being awarded for the fight. Gray, 14 vehicles, 12 troopers, amounting to 630 credits, plus 50 credits for the fight itself. He moves up to Class B. Nova, 6 troopers, amounting to 180 credits, plus 50 for the fight. She advances to E Class. The two call out that something is wrong. They claim that they had more kills. Gray should have had at least 45 troopers, but Rope says that they shouldn't be doubting the combat trackers in their clothing. The enemy army had dolls, which are just robots. They don't count. Gray says they must have been well equipped. What town were they from? And Rope replies, Town 15. Why is he asking? But Gray says no reason. They exit the room and are awarded their new advancement cards by a doll named Sure. The doll asks Gray about his consideration of becoming an inspector, but he says he's still thinking it over. They depart and drive away in Gray's buggy, and Nova remarks that she doesn't like Sure. Why was Gray saying thank you to the doll? But Gray, with a smirk, asks if she's jealous. Their conversation moves on, and Nova asks why Gray doesn't become an inspector. Yeah, it's slower, 5 years to reach Class A, but he doesn't have to risk his life. He only responds that 5 years is a long time. The buggy heads into the high-rise city we saw at the beginning, and we find that Nova has a very large apartment in the upper floors of one of the buildings. Gray looks out her window over the town below, and Nova, mostly naked, walks over to him and brings him a drink. They start a conversation about the dolls. Why did Town 15 have so many? Why are some towns better equipped? In the past, he fought a battle where the enemy had no tanks. Nova says that they are probably just more poor than others, but for Gray, that doesn't sit right. Every town has a little mama that should have a factory with the same capabilities. Why are some different? Changing subjects, Nova asks Gray what he's looking at, and he says he's looking out past River 7, to which she remarks, "Oh, the scum," referring to the beaten down side of town, and Gray tells her that's where his apartment is, over there. She's surprised. He makes so much money, why would he want to live with those people? All they do is work all day, eat, sleep, and repeat. He thinks back, and he's in that dingy apartment again as a red-headed girl comes in, obviously roughed up. He asks what happened to her. Was it troopers? But she only laughs at him. What would he do if it was? Make them pay? He only grabs his head in frustration. Back to the conversation at hand. Nova continues that with the credits they make, they can get away from the scum. Those people don't have any ambition, while they as troopers are working to become citizens. She asks him to take a shower, and then we have a sex scene. In his sleep, Gray continues the flashback. The red-headed girl, who we are now introduced to as Lips, sits naked on the edge of the bed. She doesn't want to live like this. She's going to become a trooper. She's tired of working all day for a couple of nickels. If you become a citizen, you're guaranteed food and a place to live. But Gray retorts that it's not easy becoming a citizen, and Lips lays out the system. 50 credits for each fight, 30 credits for each kill. You start at Class F, and every 1,000 credits you advance in rank. Make it to Class A, and you're a citizen. You get to go live in what is called the city. But Gray says that she should forget about it. Only 0.3% make it to citizenship, and she replies that it's better than this, better than dying here. Gray is awake now, and still laying in bed as Nova walks in carrying breakfast. He asks her if she's ever seen someone who has made it to citizen. She says no. She doesn't even know where the city is, but she would still do anything to become a citizen. Gray resumes the flashback. Lips is dressed up in her uniform and introduces her commander, Red. She puts on her helmet, the one which Gray now wears, and says goodbye, leaving him there alone. His flashback is interrupted by a sound coming from the helmet. He pulls out the earpiece to ask what it is. Red has been taken out. Gray drives his buggy through the town with Nova in tow, asking him what he's planning. The little mama and Common Rope won't even see him because it's not an actual mission. He agrees and says that the little mama hasn't even sent out a rescue team. Nova seems to know what he's planning and says to him, astounded, "You wouldn't." Approach 4. Escape. The pair sneak through the factory between tanks, avoiding low hover drones which patrol. After one of the drones has passed, they find a jet, which is Gray's real target. Nova says he can't seriously plan on stealing it, but he says he's just going to borrow it, to which Nova replies that it's a breach of regulations. It's controlled by Little Mama. Gray tells her that she can back out now if she wants, but she says that she's not going to let a wounded man go out on his own. He tells her that he's going to go find some bikes, and if she has time, she should unlock the jet. He wanders off and locates the hover bikes he is looking for. But while he does, Nova attempts to hack the lock which holds the jet in place. Unfortunately, during this time, one of the drones finds her and demands to know what she's doing there. In a panic, she shoots the drone, which sets off alarms. This, of course, upsets Gray, but it's too late to do anything about it. He tells her to forget the lock, just hop in, start it up, break free, and go through the door. She yells at him not to blame her if it gets trashed, but proceeds anyways, breaking through the hangar door with ease. This is noticed as it flies over the town, with Gray close behind riding one of the bikes and guiding the other with his free hand. He tells Nova to open her tail, to which she smiles and says, "Kinky." Gray loads up the bikes, and the pair fly away. They don't make it too far before they are pursued by the town defense aircraft, who launch missiles at them. Gray, who is now piloting, makes a loop-the-loop to get behind them and blast them down with ease using a beam cannon. They fly on free and clear now, but Nova is still worried. They'll probably get a class demotion, or worse, be completely kicked out to be regular people again. Gray says it can't be helped, but Nova says it may not be a big deal to him because he can just re-enlist and rack up credits. She can't. She isn't Death. Gray just says he owes Red. Up until Red became an inspector, he was Gray's CO, taught him everything he knows about battle, and saved his life more times than he could count. Nova solemnly says from behind him that it was to make up for not protecting Lips. And this strikes Gray, but she tries to laugh it off, saying she did some digging because she was interested in his helmet, and asks if he's mad, but he doesn't respond. They fly over what is supposed to be the DMZ of S-44, the African region Red was deployed to, and immediately are struck by a beam cannon from the ground. They're confused. Why have they been hit in a DMZ? But it doesn't matter. They're going down. Approach 5. Resistance. With their plane crashed, they use the air bikes to travel further. But what's the plan? They're over 10,000 kilometers from Town 303. Even if they rescue Red, how are they supposed to get back? If that was the resistance that shot them down, where did they get a beam cannon? Did they steal it from another town? In Town 303, they only got old armored cars and tanks that often don't even work. Why was there a jet and air bikes? It doesn't add up. These are the questions Nova asks, but Gray dismisses them as they come up over a hill to find the wreckage of Red's Walker. It's a mess, and Nova says it's been stripped of every piece of usable hardware, most likely the resistance. Gray says they're like hyenas, and Nova asks what that is. He responds that his grandfather told him about them. They were animals that lived back when the oceans were blue, and a dozen times bigger than they are now. They would leave nothing but bones after they were done with their prey. Nova hears all of this, but only remarks on the oceans being blue. To her, the ocean being blue sounds creepy. Gray finds the body of Cricket and checks an audio recorder that was on his hip. It begins to play a conversation between Cricket and Red. They are discussing if Gray is considering becoming an inspector. But killing is the stock trade of Death. Suddenly, they notice an enemy in the DMZ, the Resistance, and they have a beam cannon. The two don't have long to consider this before they are fired upon. And this is where the recording ends. They head out and decide to try to trace Red's card with their systems. As they head its direction, they pick up something, a torii gate. There must be a shrine, and Nova asks what that is. Gray only responds that it's a building of some sort of religion over in Asia. He thinks. As they arrive, they can see that there's a fight going on. Mechs are engaged in battle, some flying, some walking, and once again, the two don't know what they are looking at. Nova thinks that they are large dolls, and Gray concludes that the fight has nothing to do with them. But it's too late. A walker mech is behind them. It knocks Nova off of her bike. Gray shoots at it with his pistol and manages to dodge as it launches an energy blast that destroys his bike. He fires more shots at the mech, but they do nothing to it. It begins to charge up, but suddenly, one of the flying mechs crashes into it. The flyer swings around for another pass, but a shot disables it, so it crashes directly into the walking mech as the pilot ejects. Gray and Nova find the pilot sitting against a tree, and when he asks for help, Gray instead points his pistol at the man. A massive explosion detonates behind them, and Nova asks what's going on. The man asks where are they from, and they tell him Town 303. He says, "Oh yeah, the provinces." And Nova is confused by this word. Well, what are they doing out here? Gray tells him that they're looking for a man that the Resistance captured, named Red. The man recognizes this and says, yeah, he was an inspector from Town 303. They make their way to the interior of the shrine, and the man informs them that Red evac'd with their Guji just before the attack. The Guji are their leaders. They should be at Nagoshi, the Resistance HQ by now. This group is called Shidara. The man finally introduces himself as Lee as he takes a seat among the wreckage. Nova introduces herself and Gray, and Lee recognizes his name, aptly calling him out as Town 303's Gray Death. Gray asks about the mechs, and Lee tells him that they're called Garbs. They are an anti-resistance unit from Town 50. Most double-digit towns have them. A noise from behind Lee gets Gray at the ready, and a couple emerges from around the corner, May and Fawn. They're happy to see Lee, who responds in kind, asking how he survives, and he says that saving Death saved him. Inside the buildings of the shrine is a base, and it is trashed, even the lower levels. Lee explains that it was once a town, and when the little mama went on the blink, most of the people died. Some of the troopers walked all the way back to the town when their walker didn't show up, but when they made it back, Town 424 was dead. Shidara, a former Class B trooper, rebuilt the town. That's where the group got its name. He became one of the Guji. The towns are fragile. When there is even a little glitch in the little mama, every machine goes. Lee asks if Nova and Gray want to come along with them to Nagoshi since he's tracking Red, and he agrees, with thanks. Lee shows them one of the flying mechs that is still intact and informs them that it's called an It should work fine once the battery is charged. Fawn, the female who was with May, says that she'll go salvage a battery from one of the broken Things are finally looking up for Nova and Gray, who asks what happened to Red. And Lee tells him that he went with the Guji voluntarily. Lee then tosses Gray a lemon and tells him to eat up, and this madman bites directly into the lemon, skin and all, with no hesitation. Nova tags along with Fawn and helps her with the battery. She asks about May. Well, Fawn's pregnant with his child, and they're getting married soon. That's why they are fighting, for their ideals. Fawn asks about Nova and Gray, and Nova flat out denies any relationship, calling Gray a total jerk. They fly the two out into the desert and wait for Nagoshi, which Lee says should be close by. Nova says she can't pick up a signal from Red, but Lee tells him she won't. He's a member of the Resistance now, so he doesn't need to walk around with his ID card. Over the horizon, they see a large squadron of jets coming in, but they're not with the Resistance. Nagoshi, a large floating phallic-shaped base, appears opposite the squadron as it closes in on the base. Lee says not to worry, though. Just watch. Nagoshi begins to glow and emits a blinding light. The squadron is immediately destroyed by what Lee calls a crag shot, saying that someday Nagoshi is going to wipe out the Big Mama for all of the towns. No more citizens, troopers, or people. Their ideal world. May and Fawn excitedly run to the edge of a dune and start waving down the giant base, and Lee informs Nova and Gray that they have a special substance planted in their arm which identifies them as part of the Resistance. He then goes to join them. Nova and Gray smile at the sight. Things may be looking up. But then, a whistling can be heard. A missile strikes the trio, destroying them on the spot. And Nova and Gray are left stunned at the events and the carnage. Approach 6. Ruins. A war rages in city ruins. Tanks are destroyed by flying mechs, and when they leave, Gray emerges from an alleyway. He finds some supplies in the hatch of a tank and tosses a couple of cans of food to Nova behind him. He finds a rifle on a dead soldier, but one of the flying mechs pops up behind Nova. A soldier pops out of the hatch, and Gray shoots him in the head, taking it clean off. He goes to inspect it, and it's a doll. But this has attracted the attention of more, and the pair run into a building for cover as the mechs shoot at them. Gray aims for another shot from the window, but there's a whistling of a song behind him, and a voice says he shouldn't shoot at the Bryans. The flying mechs. They'll find out that there are survivors, and they'll just send out more big dolls. Gray shines his light on the voice, finding a cyborg which he identifies as a half. The half introduces himself as Robert J. Dimitri and says he's alone, not a trooper and not with the resistance. He begins whistling again when Nova asks what the song is, and he says it's a tune from his childhood. The building shakes, and Gray asks about the Bryans. They're anti-personnel big dolls from Town 1-8. The first dolls Gray saw were called Chambers, anti-tank units, and the squad they took out was from Town 508. He says the building won't last much longer. He has a tank downstairs that has food and water that he won't need. He just needs them to take him there. The tank is not in great shape, but Robert says he's been using it for 10 years and asks to be hooked up. Gray asks how long he's been there, and Robert replies about 4,000 hours, or 166 days. He survives off of a tank that can last him for years. Only his head needs to survive. He asks Nova to put him on a platform, and she does so while telling him that she doesn't like halves. They're pushy. He's surprised that she knows another, and she begins to tell him of Kamen Rope, before noticing that Robert looks a lot like him. It's time to leave, and so they do, but they're pursued by what Gray thinks are Oms. However, Robert corrects them that they are Kubandas from Nagoshi. A different set of dolls are also in pursuit. Gasps from Town 7. Single-digit towns are being sent out to obliterate Nagoshi because the resistance has gotten too big. Robert tells, though, that the Big Mama believes the resistance is necessary. No more time to talk. The gasps are after them. Gray tries to hit the gasp, but as large as they are, they manage to easily dodge his shots. He takes out a pillar and crushes one, but the head detaches and continues to pursue. He misses more shots, and Robert tells him that it's just a machine. If he sees the pattern, he will win. Gray finds a steady shot and takes out the head. The tank drives on, and Robert asks their names. Gray introduces himself, and Robert also recognizes him as Gray Death from Town 303. Gray remarks that he knows a lot, but Robert responds that he's been alive for 500 years. Gray asks about the Big Mama in the city, and Robert tells him that it's a master computer that controls the world. Each town's little mama is one of its children. They roll along the beach next to an ocean, which is indeed red, and Nova asks if the Big Mama arranges the fights, and Robert confirms this. Gray asks if it also controls the arms gap, which he confirms as well. So, did he just learn this in his 500 years of living? Well, he was born when the world was overflowing with humanity. The ocean was still blue and contained fish. It was also around this time Toy was developed, an incredibly advanced computer initially created for playing games with humans, but it evolved in the blink of an eye. As it was developing, countless wars were being fought. It developed a self-awareness, and now only its chosen few survive. The plant life that remains won't last another century. The chosen few? Those are the citizens. They pull up to a large rock formation and rest as Robert continues. By the time the human population began to grow again, Toy had already grown gigantic and controlled all computers. It was able to regulate and control humanity. It was then Big Mama. Gray asks where Robert will go from here, to which he responds that he has no plans. Maybe he'll go west. Gray says Nagoshi is heading west. They've been tracking it. Robert seems to be interested in this, but when Gray accuses him of knowing more, he just begins to whistle. Nova sits behind them, looking at Gray's helmet in her hands. Gray asks, what do the citizens do in the city? Protect Big Mama? And Robert says he'll have to see for himself, but Gray responds that he thinks they both know. Robert is surprised and asks if he's guessed already. Every Kamen Rope is actually a copy of Robert. He concludes that Gray may actually be able to destroy Big Mama. Nova goes to set down the helmet, but it slips and falls down a hill. Gray gives her a death stare, asking what she was doing, and she stumbles over her words before going to chase after the helmet. Just then, Kubandas swarm in, and laser blast strikes the tank, throwing Gray and Robert. Gray tries to run to Nova, but is struck by another laser blast which takes off his left arm. Nova tries to rush to him, but more lasers rain down, knocking her into a rock and unconscious. The Kubandas land, and out steps a mysterious woman, flanked to her left by a large man with one centered red eye in his helmet, and to her right, a mustached man. Approach 7. Red. Another flashback. Red and Gray in a trench. They run to the next, and Gray is panicking and breathing heavily. Red tells him to keep his center of gravity lower when running. Even if he's scared, keep fighting. The day he stops fighting is the day he dies. A montage of Gray utilizing different weapons while Red encourages him, ending with yelling that he will make him the ultimate fighting machine. Gray awakes on an operating table with a new armor and a gun arm. The man standing beside him is Red. He sees his gun arm and asks what happened. Red tells him they gave him a half operation. He would have died otherwise. He's half machine now, armed with Negoshi's latest technology. Gray questions this, and Red tells him that he is inside Negoshi, the resistance base, and they are headed for the city. We finally get a good look at the outside of Negoshi, and it's a giant statue of a robed woman. In a throne room, a woman ordained in ornate royal wear stands before a crowd of resistance soldiers, telling them that the day they will destroy the master computer draws near. Their revenge will spare no one who worship and revere the citizens, the city, and its master computer. Red and Gray stand above, observing as the crowd chants the woman's name, Lala. As they do so, they pump their fists in the air. Red tells Gray of the woman. She is the goddess of Negoshi. It was she who ordered that he be saved and given the latest technology. Gray smirks and snarkily says she's a merciful goddess who spares her enemies and looks after them until their dying day, huh? But Red only says that he said the same thing when he first arrived. Out in the waste, Nova treks on, carrying Robert, who says they just need to keep heading west. But, given his condition, Gray may be dead. She shouts, though, that he has to be alive. He's death. She knows he's still alive. Robert asks her if she's been with Gray this entire time, and she tearfully nods. He asks why she gave up becoming a citizen, and she says because she wanted to, but he laughs and replies that she values Gray more than citizenship. She throws a rock at him, but he dodges it and says he needs to tell her something, just in case. He draws a map on the ground and tells her that if she keeps heading west, she'll eventually see a mountain, and on the far side of that mountain, she'll find the city. And past the city is Big Mama. They find an abandoned and broken Kubanda, and Robert says they should be able to fix it. Approach 8. Negoshi. In the Negoshi base, Gray stands before Lala in the throne room as Red introduces him. She tells him that he is a magnificent warrior, just as Red has told. The large man with the red eye tells Gray that it is an honor to be given an arms conversion by Lady Lala, and Red tells Gray that the man speaking to him is Shidara, head of the Guji. Gray steps forward and asks Lala why she saved him. Something tells him it wasn't out of pity. She says that it was out of rage, the rage that boils within his heart, the rage of having to become a trooper to become a citizen and kill others who have the same dream, rage at the city and citizens within. It's what has kept him alive. He angrily asks, what about it? She would like to use his rage to destroy the city, and Shidara asks if he will join them, saying that his prowess will grant him the rank of Guji quickly. But Gray is focused on other matters. One of their missiles blew up an and along with it, Lee, May, and Fan. Shidara shrugs it off, saying that there was no way for them to know if the other two people down there were their enemies. Gray continues to accuse. They fired even though they knew that Lee and his friends were down there. Is that also part of their ideals? He rushes towards Lala, but is stopped by a force field of energized beams, which begin to electrocute him. Undeterred, he continues to reach out towards her, but succumbs to the effects of the energies and loses consciousness, with Lala grinning down at him. Outside the base, Nova and Robert are flying their now repaired Kubanda when they spot a fleet returning. They join formation and manage to tailgate their way in. Back inside, Gray is now restrained in a room, telling Red that he can give up because he'll never join. Red says he won't give up that easily, though. Gray is the ultimate soldier he trained, and a great achievement of Nagoshi technology as well. An alert goes out that there were intruders, interrupting this conversation. For the moment, Nova and Robert are successfully hidden, even if their presence has been detected, and they observe that Nagoshi is full of nothing but halves, leading Robert to conclude that's probably what's been done to Gray. Robert uses his robotic eye to scan their surroundings and finds a panel that interests him. Back with Gray and Red, he asks why Nagoshi is so important. It's for the chosen few, just like the city. Red tries to deny this, but Gray narrows his eyes at him, believing he may have gotten through. The panel Robert found allows him to tap into the systems of Nagoshi and locate where Red is. He manages to tap the right wires, and Gray is released. Red had left the room momentarily, and is returning just in time to see the door blown apart by Gray inside, who now emerges, telling Red he doesn't want to fight him. Just walk away. But he says he can't. With intruders about and Gray escaping, the base is on high alert, and resistance soldiers scramble all over as more alerts go out over the intercom. Nova and Robert still haven't been found, and Robert asks Nova to lift him into a ventilation shaft. She does, but asks what he's going to do. He's going to destroy the central computer. By the way, take care of Gray, Nova. You've stuck with death this long. You can't leave him now. He begins to crawl through the ventilation shaft to his destination. He knows this is where his road ends. Gray and Red are engaged in battle, an even match it seems. They strike each other with lasers from a distance, but as they both recover, Gray shoots a bundle of cables above Red which fall down and electrocute him. Gray moves on, dodging lasers from and returning fire upon the other guards as he moves through the hallways of the base. And elsewhere, Robert has found the central computer. Nova finds Gray and runs to meet him, but their reunion is cut short by new alerts going out about the failing computer. Robert has begun his destruction. Explosions erupt all over the ship, and Shidara tries to lead Lala to safety, but is intercepted by Gray. Shidara tells her to run for safety as he fires at Gray, but every shot misses as Gray rushes in and slashes Shidara a single time across the abdomen with a laser sword. The man, no, the doll, explodes behind him, revealing what he truly was. Lala runs away, and flaming rubble crashes in front of Nova and Gray, blocking their path to chase. Robert calls out to Gray over the intercom, and as he responds, he is glad to know that Gray is okay. He tells him that Nagoshi has always been the guardian of the city. Don't worry about him. Just head for the city. Gray decides to try to talk with him further, but Robert no longer responds. He continues to climb the structure of the central computer, all while whistling and thinking to himself about how he won't live to see the destruction of Toy, his creation. Nagoshi continues to erupt in explosions. Nova and Gray are blasted to the outside. They grab each other's hands as they plummet, and Nova tells him that she doesn't mind dying if they are together. Suddenly, Lala flies by in a mech, and this is not unnoticed by the pair. They do not die, however. Gray's new modifications come with a jetpack, which he uses to lower them safely to the ground, and as the two witness the final destruction of Nagoshi, it crashes behind the mountain, which Robert had told Nova about previously, and she relays to Gray that behind it will be the city. Approach 9. The city. The city, as it turns out, is little more than ruins. As they walk through, Nova is astounded, but Gray seems unfazed, saying, "This is where Robert said it was, right?" But Nova continues to lose her cool. Where have all the humans gone? Is this the real city? Gray just says that it looks that way. There probably never was a city, or any citizens. With the realization finally hitting Nova, tears begin to form. The two make it to the edge of a cliff where they can see the wreckage of the crash of Nagoshi, and close by them is Lala, brokenly walking further towards Big Mama as a call goes out to her, identifying her as doll S100. She is no longer needed, so communication will cease. She pleads, but she is deactivated. Nova and Gray are suddenly fired upon, and within the head of Nagoshi stands Red, who goes on full attack as Gray tries to tell him that they don't need to fight. Nagoshi was a lie. Please snap out of it. These words unfortunately do not affect Red, who continues firing at Gray, who is now pinned down in a trench. Nova takes action to help and finds a downed soldier. She takes his gun, but he gets up to retrieve it and she fires in a panic. Gray emerges from cover to return fire, but Red manages to destroy Gray's gun arm. Gray activates his jetpack and flies towards Red, avoiding shots while recalling all of those who have died, and as he closes in, he draws his laser sword and decapitates Red. This does not stop him, though. His body still stands and deploys laser wrist blades from his gauntlets, managing to destroy Gray's jetpack and remove his helmet. The two clash once more, but Gray lands on the shoulders of Red, plunging his laser sword down into the body through the neck hole. Red's body explodes, finally ending him for good. In his anger and sadness, Gray sifts through the rubble, clamoring for anything human remaining of Red. But there is nothing. He looks ahead in hatred, only to see the glowing tower that is Big Mama. Nova hands him his helmet, saying they didn't find anything here. But Gray says they did. Just one thing. Something he has to protect. Nova beams a bright smile at him as he finishes that this is the reason he has to destroy Big Mama. The two stand and begin making their way to the tower, and left behind is Lip's helmet on a makeshift cross. The two make their way past Lala's vehicle and past her deactivated body, and as they get closer, a massive swarm of robots emerges, and the credits roll with a fantastic outro song. As I warned earlier, we're going to move very fast through this first volume for a while. If things are different, I'll let you know. The very first part and the end is what I will most likely take the most time on. Let's go ahead and get into it. Just as with the anime, we open with Red and Cricket waiting for the return of the squad, but unlike the anime, Gray doesn't appear immediately. Here, we flash back already. Gray is sitting on his bed, less melancholic than in the anime, when Red walks in and he greets him with a snarky smile, asking him what a nice Class B trooper is doing in a dump like this. If he's looking for the John, take a right at the door. But Red only sets the helmet on the table and tells him that Lips is dead. Gray continues to wander through the desert, and we get another flashback. That beating at the beginning of the anime, it didn't happen to some random. No, it happened to Gray, complete with the troopers telling him that they are better than him. As he struggles to his feet, the scene shifts from his bloody face to him as a trooper now, looking out over another group who is eating in an abandoned courtyard while he stays hidden. As we shift back to the flashback, Lips coming home beaten and bruised, and once again, their attitudes are completely different, less woe, and more street punks making the best of it. In the present, the troopers roll out, and Gray goes down to scavenge from their left-behind food cans just labeled meat, and this transitions back to him and Lips. Gray is eating out of a very similar can, and Lips goes through the same conversation as the movie. She can't take it. She wants to become a citizen, but there's no chance of that happening. But Gray's answer actually is the one that says they could become troopers. Though this is somewhat facetious. They go over the system just as in the film. Start at Class F, get credits, make it to Class A, become citizens. And just as before, Gray tells her how unlikely it is, but she says it's better than dying here. In the present, Gray struggles as he stumbles through the desert with one thing on his mind: water. falling to his knees and leaving his rifle behind before standing up and continuing on. He keeps thinking back to her, to him telling her that the numbers are against her. It's impossible. In the meantime, maybe she'd like to... No, she doesn't feel like it tonight. With a smirk, he says he'd hate to think she was doing something she didn't feel like. But she asks what he thinks it's like in the city. He just says no idea. Well, what would he do if she joined the troopers? Back to now, Gray stumbles across what looks like a stone amphitheater, but seems to have what he's looking for. Water. He slides down a rocky embankment, only to get shot in the shoulder. He runs, but is struck again, this time grazing his hip. He continues to run as the shooter chambers another round in their rifle, and he manages to dive behind a low stone wall just as another shot strikes above him. The two analyze their situation from cover as Gray flips down his targeting monocle, asking himself if the shooter is alone. In the flashback once more, Lips says she's leaving, but not with the judgmental expression seen in the anime. No, it's with a smile. Red calls for her, and she goes, remarking that she doesn't have time anymore, and gives a final goodbye. In the present, Gray readies a pistol, as does his opponent. The last goodbye of Lips echoes in his mind, and he replies with a goodbye himself, and emerges from cover swiftly to aim and shoot his opponent in the head successfully. He takes a breath, seeing his opponent downed, and goes to drink from the nearby water, using his signature helmet as a cup. One last time to the flashback, Gray telling Red that Lips just wanted to be a citizen. That's all she wanted. And then, as in the anime, he wanders back to the walker for evac alone through the desert, carrying the helmet this time, though, of his fallen enemy. Approach 1, Battle Theater 807, Part 1. As before, we are introduced to Hawk's squad. Hawk himself, Nova, Sky, Timmy, Leo, and Turris is now Chris. And of course, Gray is being added. The same conversation, the same assignment, and the explanation that Gray will do the work of 5 Class E's. However, he's a yellow skin. She doesn't like yellow skins. And Timmy clarifies for us that she means Asian. Of course, they have all heard of him, and his battle record is recited and where to find him. Gray walks through the machine shop between the tanks with Red. A little extra dialogue with Red, being surprised how many credits Gray racked up, but the same stuff with the offer to be an inspector. However, instead of driving off and cutting to the battlefield, Hawk's squad meets up with Gray at the shop, and Hawk introduces himself, and Gray introduces himself as Gray Death. They load up the equipment into the walker and head out. The battle goes much the same as before. Sky says that they can just wipe the enemy out, and Gray hits everyone with the reality check. The B drone is launched by the enemy, and the battle begins. Sky gives an order which Gray ignores, and Sky tries to shoot at him here, but everything goes much the same after that. Sky blows up some stuff before getting blown up. The tank gets flanked, and Gray saves the day. The squad counts their kills and credits once again, and Gray gives them a reality check that the B is still out there. Same conversation also happens between Gray and Hawk about him disobeying orders before Gray knifes the B and the enemy swarms in. They move to head out, and the tank is hit, while Gray succeeds in taking down most of the enemy, including the fuel trucks. Hawk and Timmy are dead, Leo injured, and Chris, or Turris, gravely injured with Nova trying to save her before Gray shoots her in the head. Approach 1, Battle Theater 807, Part 2. Gray shoots Turris as Nova and Leo both look on. Gray gives Nova her gun, the same conversation from the film about not burying her, and they head out. We cut to the remaining squad members sitting around a fire as Nova rants about Gray being a coward and self-preserving, except here, she blames everything on him. She believes everyone's death is because Gray ignored orders, and as before, he doesn't deny it when Leo tries to intervene. He gives the same plan about using the B to lure the enemy and take their tanks, but this time, it's his idea to use the city ruins. Nova says it's suicide, But Leo corrects her that the guns take time to change direction before they can fire to shoot behind them. It's time to move out if they're with him, and he makes a snide remark, asking if they want to wait till morning, grab some bacon and eggs, and read the paper, and Nova responds that she's more the type for a grapefruit and orange juice, leading Gray to respond with the words, "Just like lips." She questions it, but he says nothing more. Let's go. Leo didn't just get an injury to his eye in this iteration. No, he also has a stomach wound, and he is bleeding from it. And as they walk down the road, it causes him to fall back a little. But when asked, he says he's all right. Nova pleads with Gray to let Leo rest, though Leo himself refuses. But then, a high-pitched whistling is heard. Gray yells for Nova to get down. All too late as a mortar lands. They survive, but are wondering how they were tracked. It's too soon. They have to be survivors cut off from the squad, probably with no heavy weapons. Leo asks Gray what they should do, but he only responds that he wishes he knew how many there are. Leo says he'll draw them out into the open, though Nova protests. He tells her that he won't be able to last the rest of this trip with a bullet in his gut, and as he runs off, he yells to Gray for him to get Nova home safe. He's quickly torn apart by gunfire. Nova screams, but Gray manages to count that there are two. He yells for Nova to stay down as he rises from cover and blasts away with the machine gun, killing both of the enemies. They survive the situation and head to Leo's body. And unlike Chris, and in the anime, he offers to help bury Leo. The pair make it to the city ruins, and Gray tells Nova no sound, because they don't know if the enemy is camping here, which she responds in the background saying she hates him while making faces. He gives directions, and they deploy the bee, take their posts, and don their combat monocles. It doesn't take long for the enemy to arrive, and the battle plays out much the same, except Nova doesn't alert the enemy. Gray jumps out and shoots the commander, Nova rains down shots on the enemies from above, and Gray grenades tanks. A last remaining enemy manages to get the drop on Gray with an SMG, but only wings his shoulder and abdomen before Gray shoots him through the chest. He doesn't have time to tend to the wound as the scavengers show up. They load up on the tank and hightail it out of there. Once on the road, Nova asks about his wound, but he says she can make it back by herself, with a smirk. She asks about Lips. Who is she? And he simply replies, "My girl." Nova asks if she's dead, and he replies bang, showing her the helmet. The conversation quickly moves on, and she asks if he feels like breakfast. She can probably dig up some bacon and eggs, and he replies that maybe he can find her a grapefruit orchard, to which she replies not to forget the orange juice. Approach 2. R&R. We get a good view of Town 303, and if you've been around, you know my love for well-drawn cityscapes. Very soon, we're at the Little Mama and their stats are read off. All the same happens. Disagreement over numbers, but the revelation that there were dolls in the enemy squad. This time, Kamen makes the same offer that Red does about becoming an inspector, and the conversation with Nova about his denial comes as they walk down a hallway instead of on the road. They encounter the doll, sure, and she inquires also about the inspector position, which Gray is still turning down. The same conversation about Nova not liking Sure occurs, but this time in an elevator. As they leave the building, she asks if he plans to walk home, but he says he has a car. She asks why he didn't tell her before, and he responds that she didn't give him a chance. So she calls him a cold fish, but he just smirks and says, "Sorry." The conversation in the car is different because the ones from the anime have already happened elsewhere. She tells him his problem is that he's too laconic. He doesn't talk enough. Doesn't he think so? But he says no. Well, what about when Lips was alive? Was he always so tight-lipped? He says probably, but she says she doubts it. But she's just guessing. If he doesn't want her to guess, then why doesn't he talk to her? Too much trouble, he says. He takes her to his apartment, and she's surprised. This is really his room? He asks if there's something wrong with it. She calls it a hovel for people, meaning not troopers, cowardly, gloomy, spiritless people, just working for a few coins a day, eating, sleeping, but he says Maybe he's cowardly and gloomy too. It's much like the film. There's a lifestyle that comes with being a trooper, so they can fully recoup when they go back to battle. He smiles and asks, "Is that so?" And she responds firmly that, yeah, it is. She says they should go to her place. It stinks in here. Gray jovially sniffs the air, and soon we are at Nova's high-rise apartment. She asks what he thinks. This is how a trooper lives. But he says he doesn't think he could get used to it, and with a wink and a smile, she says he will get used to it soon enough. She strips and offers him his selection of drink, and he chooses cognac. The same conversation from before. Why was Town 1-5 so much more well-equipped? Why do some towns have less than others? They have the same computers, same factories. Why are there differences? She asks him to take a shower, and he asks why. Slightly upset, she tells him not to play dumb, and he says his wound hasn't closed yet. She suggests maybe he should close her wound. I'm reciting exactly what the words are. Out at Red's Walker, instead of just hearing the conversation from before on a recorder when Gray finds the wreckage, we get to see it, though it's still pretty much the same when the resistance appears on their monitoring equipment. Cricket asks if they would attack, and Red says they don't have the balls. Rocket incoming. Red scrambles and demands Cricket open the hangar so he can get to the tank, but it's too late. It's a direct hit. The walker explodes, and an explosion awakes Gray. He climbs out of Nova's bed to go check the blinds, and she asks what he's doing. He responds, bombing. We see that out the window there are billows of smoke. Nova asks where, and he says near his apartment as he begins to put on his clothes. She asks where he's going. Leave it alone. The town defense force will... He cuts her off. He left his helmet in his room. She demands to know what's so important about that helmet. He gives her a look, and she says he can't forget about lips. But with a smug smile, he tells her he's forgotten, but he has a funny-shaped head. No helmet fits unless it has holes. Gray enters his side of town, and he sees rubble and smoke, and suddenly he's blinded. Men tell him to freeze, demanding an ID, but he just says turn it off. They recognize him as a trooper and ask what a Class B is doing here, but he asks what town the enemy is from as he finds his helmet and picks it up. They tell him, no town. Stunned, he asks if they mean, and they confirm it's the resistance. They're getting more aggressive, and now they have tanks. Nova calls over the radio in Gray's helmet, asking him if he's there. He confirms, and she informs him that she just got the report about Red, that he was wiped by the resistance. Gray takes off running. Approach 3. The Demilitarized Zone. Nova and Gray race through the city, with Nova telling Gray that she doesn't know, just that Rope told her that Red had been lost. As before, the little mama and Rope won't see them because they're not on assignment. He's going to bring back Red, though, and she asks how. How are they going to get to Africa? Is he crazy? But he just tells her to think about it. How do they get to combat zones? She says she's not stealing a bird. Mama controls all the birds. He responds that maybe the big birds that haul land carriers, but if it's one of the little ones, like Red showed him in the factory the other day, Nova is still repeating that it's impossible. They don't even know if Red is still alive. But Gray says they don't know if he's dead either. Still trying to convince Gray not to do what he's doing, she says that Mama may send someone to rescue him, and Gray asks if she really believes that. If Mama was such a sweetheart, everyone in the town would be a citizen by now. And so they drive on until Gray screeches the car into a sliding stop in the machine shop. The next scene plays out pretty much exactly the same. Gray goes to find their air bikes while Nova tries to unlock the jet. She gets caught, shoots the drone, sets off the alarms, and then Gray tells her to just fly the jet out, and we get a very similar joke to the movie where Gray tells her to open her rear so he can come in, and she calls him a nasty boy. He loads the bikes, and they successfully escape. While they banter, the town defense force swoops in behind them and tries to take them down, but Gray outmaneuvers them and takes down the pursuing craft. We have the same conversation about being demoted or being made regular people again, with Gray retorting that he owes Red and explaining their history. But Nova didn't look into Lips this time. Instead, Gray explains fully that Lips was in Red's squadron, just for one operation she never came back from. They hit the DMZ, and it's not a beam cannon that takes them down, it's surface-to-air missiles. However, a bit of teamwork and they locate the source and launch missiles of their own to blow up the opposing force. Though it's successful, they're still going down. They suit up and take the bikes with a little bit of back and forth before the bird crashes, and off they go. Approach 3. Demilitarized Zone, Part 2. Nova and Gray plummet through the sky on their bikes, and Gray gives instructions on what to do next in order to survive, including how to operate the bike. One after the other on his signal, they fire the boosters on their bikes, and he continues on with the instructions, telling her how to now stabilize, and before long, they are safely on the ground. Now that they are on the ground, Nova asks how they plan to get home after they rescue Red. Of course, the bird crashing was not part of Gray's plan. With the distance back to Town 303, it's not going to be easy to make it back. But before they focus on that, they should focus on surviving the next battle that's coming right at them. What? He tells Nova that he'll take the left and she'll take the right. She asks what he means. Are the bikes armed? He responds that it's a combat bike. The red switch on the right runs the guns. Probably. Probably, he says. Great. She fiddles with the bike and excitedly exclaims that she did it when the gun pops up, but Gray is already telling her to quit playing around. It's here. An explosion lands behind him, and up ahead is a tank. Seemingly like a pro, he activates some switches that launch a swarm of rockets at the tank, and though they connect, the tank is unfazed and continues forward, launching a shot from the main cannon that Gray narrowly avoids. The main cannon swivels and follows him as he goes around the side, but Nova comes in and her bike has a beam cannon that punches directly into the tank, successfully destroying it as she parks momentarily. Gray tells her eyes front though, they have enemy bikes coming their way. He draws a pistol, aims, and manages to knock both enemies off of their bikes, which crash to the ground and explode as Nova and Gray make their escape. As they ride along, Nova makes some observations. The birds and bikes, obviously for combat, but they're always sent out with old equipment. Well, they could just be prototypes, the squad from the last town being so well equipped, and the air bikes that the Resistance just had, they would have to be stolen from another town. Why is the divergence in weaponry so great? Gray responds, why doesn't she ask Mama? And seeming to catch on, Nova responds, as if she would answer. They find Red's walker, or, as they call it here, a land carrier. And we have the same events from the anime, the talk of hyenas, the oceans, and then the recording from Cricket. Except, in the film, we are given no reason to believe that Red was taken, other than them not locating his body. In the recording from this iteration, we hear Red asking who his attackers are and demanding they let him go. Gray immediately hops on his bike and tells Nova it's time to go. As before, they find the Torii gates up ahead, and they assess the situation differently. They don't know how many are inside, so they don't want to rush it from the front. But is there any other way? The enemy could have radar, so they can't go in from the air. They could go underground, but Gray says he's no mole, and Nova says her either. So, they really have no choice but to go in the front. Nova asks if they have a chance, and with a smile, Gray says, no way. Nova says he'll do it anyways, and Gray confirms. They don't even know if Red is still alive, but after a moment, Nova says she'll take the left. They prepare to engage, but suddenly there is a rumbling. A dust cloud out in the desert is kicking up. They question it, but they know it's something big. Could it be on their side? 303 never had a force like that. Could it be other towns? Don't know, but they don't seem to be the Resistance. Gray decides they retreat and wait to see what happens. But the large mech from the film shows up, and a much similar battle takes place. It knocks Nova off her bike and launches a shot into Gray's, while he manages to avoid it before firing rounds from his pistol which bounce off without any effect. Nova alerts Gray, and he turns to see a large force of mechs at the Torii gate. Approach 3. Demilitarized Zone, Part 3. The squad of mechs is huge, leaving Gray and Nova at a serious disadvantage. But all the same, Gray aims his pistol. He fires a shot, and the squad explodes. Rushing down the steps behind them are the flying mechs, and the battle begins. Explosions and casualties on both sides as the opposing forces engage each other. Nova and Gray question what's happening, but it doesn't seem to have anything to do with them, so they run. They get to safety, and Nova asks what the hell those dolls were. She's never seen them that big, and Gray simply responds, "Who's she asking? He didn't make them." She frustratedly replies that she knows he didn't, and he smiles with a chuckle, saying, "Good for you." Gray proceeds on, and Nova demands to know where he's going. They can't trace Red's ID signal from this courtyard. Gray says he can't figure out why the Resistance would bring Red here. Nova says it's probably to get information, maybe about the giant dolls, but Gray says Red wouldn't know anything about that. Nova processes this, agreeing since Town 303 doesn't have anything like these weapons. Gray says that Red's an inspector. The Resistance doesn't have a little mama or a factory, so what they would need most is a mechanic, someone who knows how things work. But where would that hangar be? Gray fires a shot, and out of a building come two drones, which he shoots down with a smile. Nova goes over to one of the downed drones, and Gray asks if she can plug into the drone or guard mech's memory with her card case, before patting himself on the back, saying, "Damn, I'm smart." She says she guesses so, and he tells her to hurry up. She asks why doesn't he just do it, but he responds he'd love to. However, he's got another job to do, as he shoots down another drone and asks if she'd like to trade. Forget it. She's got an aptitude for electronics. There's an explosion right in front of them. Time is running out, but Nova needs just a little bit more. Gray fires a shot towards where the explosion came from, and one of the big walking mechs steps out of the bushes. Nova says she's finished, but it's just a little too late. The mech fires a blast at them, and Gray dives out of the way, asking if this thing has a weak point anywhere. It's an ugly mother. Nova cuts him off, saying she wouldn't like it if it were gorgeous. One of the flying mechs swoops in and blows apart the walking mech before landing in front of Nova and Gray. The pilot mistakes them for being on the side of the Resistance, asking them what happened to their ohms. Were they destroyed? By the way, they're not ohms here, they're ohms. There should be a few left in the treasury. The enemy has reached the dance shrine, so Nova and Gray need to guard the corridor. Gray says yes sir, and they go to find their way inside, as Gray says that last encounter took a few years off of his life, and Nova playfully responds that she thought he was immortal. They struggle to navigate their way to the treasury while discussing the mechs they just encountered. What if all resistance groups have things like ohms? They find what they're looking for, and Nova asks, how do they steal one? But Gray says, maybe you don't, before walking in and demanding with authority to know where his ohm is. One of the mechanics motions with his thumb over his shoulder. This way, do they need two? Gray responds, yeah, the enemy has advanced to the dance shrine, and the man responds that they brought 50 garbs, right? Gray says, yeah, as he climbs into the cockpit of one, and the man says not to break them this time. Gray tells Nova it's time to roll out, and she calls him by name. The mechanic now knows something is up, and starts to yell after them and alerts the others that they are troopers. As they make their way, they note that there is still no sign of Red. He could be badly injured. He could be dead. The clinic is behind the offering hall, and they would have to go through the dance shrine. But just then, one of the walker mechs, a garb, appears and it fires on them. They avoid the shots and take it down with the machine guns mounted to the ohms. Unfortunately, ahead, the clinic is destroyed. They pause for a moment and open their cockpits to converse. Gray says they should go back, and as Nova starts to respond, the main building erupts in a massive explosion. The big dolls have won. They decide to head back, but a garb appears and fires on them. Gray rushes in and grabs it with the claw-like feet of his ohm, but it knocks him off. As his ohm is being sent away, the garb aims. Nova rushes in to save him, blasting away with her mounted machine gun, but the garb manages to land a blow to Gray. Though he continues to fight, firing with his own machine gun, one of the legs of his ohm is blasted off. It's looking bad, but another ohm runs in and holds the garb in place, telling them to fire now. They don't know who it is, but they take the shot anyways, with thanks. After all is said and done, the two stand among the smoldering wreckage and check on each other. But where's the guy who saved them? Gray says maybe he bought it. However, from the smoke, a figure walks through, saying not to be stupid. He doesn't die that easy. It's Lee. He exclaims that his leg got banged up, but with a smile, Gray aims his pistol at him and says he's glad it was just his leg. Now drop his gun. This surprises Lee, but Gray just says, sorry, pal. Too bad they don't belong to the Resistance. Lee stammers out a couple of buts, and Gray continues that they don't belong to those monsters either. They're from Town 303. Lee is confused. Provincials? Gray is also confused, asking what he means by provincials, but Lee just asks them what are they doing out here? And they of course explain that they're looking for Red. And Lee says, oh yeah, he said he was an inspector. But Nova and Gray ask, where is he? Approach 4. Shidara. The full amount of devastation to the Jinja site is shown. Lee tells Nova and Gray that Red must have escaped earlier with the Guji. The word used to mean priest, but now basically means commander. They've probably reached Nagoshi's altar by now, their base. Lee explains that Nagoshi is a resistance group, just like this one, Shidara. They have names like the towns have numbers. Gray asks Lee his name, and they introduce themselves, going over the revelation that this is indeed Gray Death. No resistance group is dumb enough to take him on, not after what happened in Kubiki, a group Gray wiped out in Battle Theater 295. As he explains, Nova bandages Gray's eye, which was damaged in the last fight. Gray responds, it was their fault. They attacked first. Who'd fight an enemy you can't pull credits for, even with a total wipe? Lee asks what they plan to do now, and Gray asks if Nagoshi is far from here, but Lee tells him that it's more heavily armed than Shidara, and anyway, Red went with the Guji voluntarily. Nova asks why, but Lee gives kind of a non-answer. Regardless, they're going, and Red can answer for himself. Lee asks what happens to him now, and Gray just snarkily responds, you don't want to stay here by yourself? Lee says he hopes they still have some working homes. Nova would like to get some clean clothes, but Lee responds that there are no women in their group, so she won't be able to get a change of underwear. Regardless, she hopes for a shower, but Lee tells her not to count on hot water either. Gray asks about the Garbs, and Lee explains that the big one giving orders was called Leonard. They're anti-resistance weapons from Town 50. Leonard is the only one with a human pilot. Gray asks about Town 50, and Lee explains that 1- or 2-digit towns have special weapons. Town 50's poorly armed compared to some others, but even they had enough to level Shidara, which means Shidara wasn't much either. Lee tells them that this isn't their fight, as he observes that the substructure was wiped out too, and they climb down underground. He gives the story from the anime about the town's little mama breaking down. The survivors left, and the troopers out in battle hiked back when no one picked them up. They rebuilt the town, but none of the people ever returned. The leader was a Class B, Shidara. That became the name of the town, and he became the Guji. We get the same explanation that the towns are fragile. When a little mama breaks down, so does everything else. Lee asks himself out loud how he survived, surveying the rubble, and Gray responds, maybe it's because he saved Death. Anyways, what do they do now? Doesn't look like they have a chance of finding an home in good shape, but a thought strikes Lee. He reveals to them a prototype. It looks like a massive and much more armored Ohm. Of course, Gray asks if it will go, and Lee says it was meant to, but to Nova, this sounds risky. They're going to try it out anyways, and Lee tells Gray to find a battery while Nova asks about clean clothes. He starts to tell her to just pull some off of a dead body, but stops himself and tells her to go to the laundry room. It's down the hall, and there's a shower room next to it. They're deeply indebted, she says with a smile, but he smirks and says to spare the formalities. Before she goes, he asks about her, and she asks why. No reason, just that he hasn't seen a woman for about 8,000 hours, close to a year. She asks if he has a family. He had a wife. Did she die? He doesn't know. Gray comes walking up with a battery on a cart, asking if it will do, which it will. What about fuel? They'll probably have to pull a tank from another ohm, which will mean a lot of fiddling with the carburetor. He tells Gray to get some sleep while he can, but the response is that he never liked being shot in his sleep. Lee retorts that he was a born warrior, wasn't he? And Gray says he'd rather be called a coward. Well, Lee's just a big sissy too. Sounds like they were meant for each other. Gray says he's going to go take a shower, but suddenly alarms start going off. There's some cheeky back and forth before they look out to see that there's an entire swarm heading their way. Gray asks if there's any humans, and Lee responds no. They're just Ramas, some new model. Nova comes running out with nothing but boots and a jacket on, asking what's going on. She didn't have time for clothes, and she's right. There's a boom as they are hit. Gray asks Lee when they get started, but he yells back, "Ask the damn machine." Gray and Nova grab weapons and run off as Gray shouts that Lee has 5 minutes and tells Nova to move it. She demands to be able to put on underwear, but he replies with a smile, only if she wants to die. Why would they die if she put on her underwear? Because he'd lose all his will to fight. Gray blasts away with a large beam weapon, destroying the first Rama he sees. Another pops up, and Nova begins to fire as well. They fight on, with Gray declaring that they can't kill him because he's the hero. A Rama swoops in behind him, and Nova calls out. Gray adeptly leaps over it and tells her to fire, which she does, successfully blowing it up. Gray remarks that she fights better without clothes, and she yells back it's only because she doesn't want to die naked, and continues to fire, taking out another Rama. They keep fighting, but there are too many of them. One chases Nova, and Gray yells for her to get down as he prepares to fire. But the battery is dead. Nova dives, and the Rama explodes behind her. To their surprise, Lee is there in the prototype ohm, with a smile asking, "How's his timing?" And Gray asks if he was waiting for his cue. How'd you guess? Nova hops into the second pilot seat behind Lee, and Gray climbs onto the side of one of the arms. Lee tosses him a new battery for his gun, and Gray asks if the ohm is arm. Well, it is a prototype. They confirm another target, and Gray blasts it. They power through the ensuing explosion. There's a whole other swarm ahead, and Gray asks how many rounds he can fire full auto on his energy weapon. Lee answers that it's an ohm cannon. Nobody can fire full. Gray interrupts him. Damn it, how many rounds? 12. Gray tells Nova to hold him tight, and he fires. Approach 5. Nagoshi. First encounter. They have somehow survived and parked the ohm out in the desert. They now check on Gray, who has a couple of broken ribs, but Lee says a normal man would be dead. Guess Gray has the touch, but he'll do better next time, after the old ribs heal. Lee says that he hopes the enemy doesn't hit them before then, and Gray asks how far from there to Nagoshi. Lee answers that it's a floating base, permanently in the air. The radar's jammed. Too useless. Well, all they have to do is trace Red's ID card, but we know that won't work. Lee tells them to give it a try, and as Nova does, he explains that they don't have to carry ID cards. Gray asks why Red did it. Why give up becoming a citizen? The response? He tells Gray to ask himself, what is a citizen? What is a city, really? Well, wasn't Lee a trooper once? Town 424? Of course he was. Became a trooper to become a citizen, just like the rest of them. So what will they do after they become citizens? And Nova says she'll move into the city where she doesn't have to fight in any more operations. Lee smiles. So, what are you really fighting for? And it seems to dawn on the two. Lee and Gray exchange looks before he continues. In Town 424, there were 5,200 troopers and 47,700 regular people. That's 52,900 men and women stripped of their right to citizenship because of a tiny glitch in their little mama. Just one computer error. Can you say that would never happen to the Big Mama? It would never happen in the city? Most resistance groups like Shidara and Nagoshi are made up of people who had their rights stripped. Nova asks, is that why he hates troopers? But he says he doesn't hate them. He just hates the city, citizens, Big Mama, and all who worship them. Well, here come those who worship them. A new swarm of Ramas appear, and the group readies for battle as Lee says he thinks what he hates most is their persistence, but Gray says that they're cut from the same cloth. And Lee asks in turn, is he really? To which he responds, he was until yesterday. They get into position, this time with Gray in the front seat driving, Nova in the back, and Lee on the shoulder. Nova asks if Gray's ribs are all right, and he says, well, if they're not, then they'll all die together. Lee tells Nova that he lashed the rear cannon to the bar so they can't fire to the sides, and he tells Gray that his cannon's batteries are wired directly to the ohm, so he can fire 30 rounds full auto, but if he tries more, Gray cuts him off. Eyes front. It's a garb. They hit it, but then they see it's a swarm of garbs and Ramas, and the Leonard is in the middle. They rocket up through the group, and Lee tells Nova to fire. She does, and a spray of blasts go out, destroying multiple mechs. A Rama is above them, and as shots rain down on the group, Lee tells Gray to crawl between them. Easy for him to say. Gray screams for them to get out of his way as a Rama swoops in and collides with the ohm, which it catches with its feet. They're on top of it now, and above them is Leonard, so they jump, rocketing upward through the group towards Leonard. Face to face with it, Lee aims the ohm cannon and fires. Leonard is destroyed. The other Garbs and their accompanying Ramas retreat. Lee says they're just machines, destroy their command system, and all they know how to do is go home. The problem is next time. Gray says the mechs have collected more than enough info about their strength, and Lee remarks that he is looking pale. And as they land, he says that he feels like shit too. Later, Lee asks Nova how Gray is doing. She's not sure, but not well. Lee believes Gray's broken ribs are pushing into his lungs. There's nothing they can do here. Gray tells them to leave him, but Lee says that would be asking for trouble. If it's just him and Nova, how will they evade Town 50's strike and reach Nagoshi? But Gray says it will be the same with him along. Well, if it's the same, then they'll bring him. But why? Lee answers that he doesn't want Nova killed. If he leaves Gray there, Nova will stay too, and staying will get her killed. Is he in love with her? Well, he responds with a smirk. That's a good one. He doesn't look like it, but he's a married man. Well, that doesn't mean he can't fall for her, does it? The conversation ends as Lee informs the group that something is coming. But not Town 50 troopers. It's a whole battalion of aircraft. They must be anti-resistance troops of some kind, but the familiar phallic-shaped floating craft appears, and Lee remarks with delight that it's Nagoshi. Nova is worried, though. The aircraft have found it, and Lee tells her not to worry, that a battalion like that won't even phase it. We know this to be true. Nagoshi charges up, and the crag shot is fired, destroying all incoming attackers in an instant. Gray remarks on the power, and Lee tells him that the day will come when Nagoshi destroys Big Mama, and then there will be no more citizens, troopers, or people. They'll never have to fight again. Gray asks if Lee really believes he can create a world like that, but is interrupted by a scouting plane as Lee begins to wave it down, remarking on the substance used for identification in his arm. The plane sensors pick it up, and the plane drops a bomb. It blows up the ohm, and the plane returns to Nagoshi. When the dust begins to clear, the only one left is Gray. Lee and Nova are dead. Gray sits by their corpses and says to himself, their promised land, only for the chosen. Stop it. Stop this lunacy. End of Volume 1. Volume 2. Approach 6. Ruins. A battle rages on. Mechs against tanks. A tank will take down a mech, and a mech takes down a tank until there is only one left. And though that tank puts up a good fight, it is no match for the flying mechs. Once they have disposed of it, they fly away, leaving the wreckage of the battlefield in the streets of the abandoned city where only smoke and dust remains, as well as Gray. He scavenges the cargo of a tank to find a can labeled beef, and that puts a smile on his face. 2 more cans and a rifle from a dead soldier, He's doing well. A soldier behind him aims a pistol, but aware of his surroundings, Gray quickly turns around and fires the new rifle, removing the head of the soldier. With a satisfied grin, he scavenges more food from the streets, but something catches his attention. He activates his combat monocle and spots the flying mechs. The chambers are returning. He flips the monocle back into the helmet and takes off running, not a moment too soon as shots are fired and the streets begin to erupt. The chambers rain heavy fire down, and the tops of buildings crumble as he continues to run, dipping through the streets until finding a window to hop through. He takes cover and peeks around to take aim, but a voice tells him not to shoot. He turns to see who it is, and a face in the shadow tells him that he would only be announcing that there are survivors, as well as bringing more Bryans down against him. What the hell are Bryans? The face in the darkness relays to him that they are anti-personnel dolls from Town 1-8. The ones that he met are Chambers. Gray aims his gun at the face, which continues to speak, telling him that the squad they wiped was from Town 508. The face asks what resistance group Gray is with, but Gray demands that he introduce himself first. Robert J. Dimitri. On his own. No group affiliation. Not a trooper. Not resistance. The building creaks a bit, and Robert asks for Gray to lower his weapon. Gray tells him he will as soon as he comes out of the dark. We know this isn't possible, and Robert relays as much. He tells him to close his eyes, and Gray shines a flashlight on him, revealing that Robert is a halfling. They're not called halves in this iteration. As before, there's a tank in the basement with rations that Gray can have if he will carry Robert there, and Gray agrees. Everything proceeds as it does in the anime, except without Nova. Then they leave. They are pursued by, just as in the anime, what Gray presumes are Ohms, only to be corrected that they are Kubanda from Nagoshi. Robert asks how he knows about the Ohms, but Gray asks about what's following the Kubanda. It's Town 7's gas, but here they don't have a body, only a head. Robert concludes that the single-digit towns, the high-powered towns, are finally being sent against Nagoshi. It's gotten too big for their purposes. Gray questions what he means. Robert says it's just what he thinks. Gray finishes the thought, saying, "Is Robert trying to tell him that Big Mama wants to keep the resistance around? What for? The Kubanda have been wiped, and the Gasps are after them now." Gray introduces himself, and Robert recognizes him. Gray retorts that Robert is Mr. Know-It-All, and he aims his new rifle, to which Robert replies he should be after 500 years. Gray asks about this, and Robert says, yeah, 500 years ago, when the sea was still blue, when the world was alive with humankind, he was born. Born just as the computers began to obtain consciousness. The Gasps fire at them, and Gray returns fire in kind as Robert continues. The first was called Toy, and it was Toy that... He stops mid-sentence to tell Gray to fire, which he does, but misses, declaring it's too quick, and Robert says it's just as quick as any other computer. Look at how they move. Doesn't he see that the dolls he's fought so far must have been slowed down or restricted? Gray asks, does he mean it was just to keep the resistance alive? And Robert says that he's catching on. But why? They say that the moment Toy achieved consciousness, his first question was also, why? Why are humans so excessively numerous? Why do they go on increasing their numbers? Why do they squander the forests they need? Why do they spoil their own atmosphere? Why do they build countless nuclear weapons? Then Toy analyzed his questions. Toy reached a very simple conclusion. Gray fires at the remaining Gasp, but it manages to dodge, so Robert fires from the main cannon and manages to take it down. Clearly, the human race wants to become extinct. Approach 7. Rope. As they drive on, and Gray questions Robert's words. The humans wanted to become extinct? Robert responds, that is what Toy concluded, and then he acted upon his conclusion. Toy established a global communications network of computers. With a virus program, he took control of them, and Toy's will became the will of all computers. Then, to fulfill his supposed human desire for extinction, he started a war. On the monitor inside the tank, they see 3 more blips. Gray asks what happened next, but Robert tells him that the blips are gas. Incoming, at 8 o'clock, distance, 5,000 meters. 3 of them. They have to break. Gray asks if they can lose them, and Robert says he'd like to. Gray responds curiously that he'd like to get at least one shot in, and Robert tells him that they're fully armored gas, not nearly as mobile as those before. Well, how much stronger is their firepower? And Robert answers that it's about 20 times. Well, Gray's not ready to die yet. And Robert tells him that they're machines, so they run on a pattern. If they can just read the pattern. Gray asks which one of them is going to do that. Shots rain down around them. They're already within firing range. Robert apologizes that they're stuck in his old crate. With a smile, as he flips down his monocle, Gray says, double suicide with a 500-year-old man. He'll never live it down. Robert asks, then why doesn't he shoot them down? These are the gaffs with a body. He takes aim and misses. Robert again tells him he has to read their pattern. Sarcastically, Gray asks, where's the owner's manual? And Robert responds in kind with, check the glove compartment. Gray calls him an old fart and tells him that this is why he hates Halfling. And Robert asks if he actually knows any others, to which he responds, naming Grope, saying it's funny. He actually looks a lot like him. Robert tells Gray to get down. They're opening up. The gas closest to them fires lasers from its eyes and several ports on the body. The ground around them is struck in many places, one hitting close enough to break the tread on one side of the tank. Robert calls for Gray's attention, who says that all they're doing is wasting his battery if he can't get the pattern. He hooks up to an external battery, clicks a knob, and prepares to fire. A wave of laser fire emits from the rifle, striking one of the gas in multiple places on the body, causing it to explode. The main cannon fires, and Robert demands Gray's attention as eyes front. Another gasp incoming. He manages to hit it, but all too late. Another fires upon them from above, demolishing their tank. Gray and Robert are thrown from the vehicle. As Robert's body strikes a stone pillar, he tells Gray that in the stock compartment of his rifle, he'll find 2 compact battery packs. As Gray slaps one in, Robert tells him to be conservative, as it'll only power 20 rounds full auto. The gasp is coming. Gray fires and hits. It is destroyed. As Gray approaches the halfling's body, Robert tells him that he lives up to his name, Gray Death. Unfortunately, Gray informs him that all of their rations were destroyed, and Robert guesses that he will leave him. Gray turns to leave and asks what he would get from lugging him around, and Robert responds, only the rest of the story. This catches Gray's attention, who turns to look back at Robert. The old halfling is sticking his tongue out. He picks up the old man and asks which way, and is answered with there being an ocean to the east. With his tank, they can convert seawater into drinking water, and so they are off, and before long, they're at the beach. Gray asks Robert about what he said, when the sea was blue, and Robert says that there were fish in the sea. What are fish? Well, everything is extinct. There was nothing left but the computers and a few chosen men and women to protect those computers. The few surviving plants won't last another century, and those chosen men and women are citizens. These days, Toy is known as Big Mama. So citizens are just there to protect the computers, and towns were created just to produce more citizens. So the human population grew again, and when the town numbers finally reached 3 digits, Toy realized that if this continued, humankind would fill the earth again, but that would thwart the human will to become extinct. So, Toy created the class system for people wanting citizenship. Thus, the endless war among the towns was launched. Gray then speaks. This was just to take care of computers? That's all Lips died for? And Hawk, Chris, Leo, and Cricket? They all died for that? Robert continues. The first resistance groups formed soon after. Troopers kill each other, and the resistance kills the surviving troopers for weapons and food. Gray is still processing this. Just for that. Lee and Robert goes on. Troopers in turn get credits for killing resistance fighters. And Nova? Just for that? Gray crushes the can he's holding. Gray asks how. How does Robert know all of this? The halfling responds, because he's old. Gray isn't satisfied, but Robert tells him something is coming. Gray says, save your tricks, but Robert insists. So, flipping down his combat monocle, Robert tells him where to look. Chambers. They're being chased by Kubandas. Nagoshi's Kubandas. Gray asks if there are men inside chambers, and Robert says, yeah, so? What is he intending? Gray responds that he's going to get him a present. A new body that will let him slip into Nagoshi with no trouble. Robert questions this, and Gray answers that he's going to ice Nagoshi. And then, it's Toy's turn. If he doesn't like it, he can run away now. But Robert asks with astonishment, has Gray seen the truth? Well, what does he mean? And Robert replies that the director of every town, Rope, is an exact duplicate of him, and that he is the one who created Toy. Gray stoically asks, does he think he cares? It doesn't have shit to do with him. He's going. Approach 8. Nagoshi, Part 1. The Kubandas and Chambers have begun their battle, and Gray watches on, commenting on the fight, with what seems like an obvious preference for the Chambers. The Chambers seem to be disappointing him with their performance, though he believes they have more firepower. There's an explosion too close for comfort behind him, and he's thrown off of his feet. It seems like it was meant for him, and he asks out loud if they're stupid enough to be attacking the one man on the ground. And he joins the fight, firing his gun into the fray and striking one of the Chambers. Gray congratulates himself, and the Chamber lands and begins firing at him, but he dodges the shots while taunting the mech that it needs to watch its back, which is true, as a Kubanda swoops in from behind and fires at the Chamber. However, Gray takes aim and takes down the attacking Kubanda. The Chamber has lost sight of Gray and scans for him, but he's on top of it and manages to release the hatch on the cockpit before greeting the pilot with a gun to the face and a good morning. He tells him, don't get yourself killed. Joining the resistance isn't so bad, and kicks him out of the mech onto the ground, continuing that even if he keeps on fighting, all he's doing is protecting computers. The mech now belongs to Gray, and he climbs into the cockpit, remarking that it's a hell of a machine. Next to this, an ohm is a toy. You lose a little mobility, but what the hell? It'll do. He immediately begins picking a fight with the closest Kubanda, and after firing on it, he bashes it into the ground, and it calls for friends. The one he was attacking isn't fully incapacitated though, and takes him by surprise for a moment. He leaps above it and fires both guns, blasting it to pieces. He's got a new attitude, an air of confidence, and he's taking on the next Kubanda, managing to avoid shots and bashing it as well. It hits the ground, and Gray ejects from the chamber, right as the Kubanda fires on him, destroying his mech. But out of the blast, he emerges, soaring through the air and landing a shot with his rifle through the cockpit of the Kubanda, killing the pilot. He hits the ground gracefully and scans the sky with his monocle. One chamber left. He calls to Robert and relays to him that he managed to snag him a Kubanda, and Robert says he saw. The Kubandas will pull back to their base when they kill the last chamber. Well, what is Robert going to do? The old halfling tells him not to ask stupid questions. Gray takes off and finds Robert some distance away, who then asks him how he's going to destroy Nagoshi. He can't do a lot with one single Kubanda. Their conversation is interrupted by calls from the rest of Nagoshi's squad trying to contact the former pilot. Gray, with a smile, says, wouldn't he have answered by now if he could? The squad concludes that he's having radio trouble, but they do note that there's a hole in his cockpit shield. A status is given for the rest of the team, and they're on their way as Robert takes over piloting. They approach Nagoshi, and the head of the squad calls in. Commands are given as to what hangar to go to, and the squad leader reports on the dead. Once again, we are given a sense of scale for the base as they head into the hangar entrance in the forehead. It's massive. Gray lands with the rest of the squad, as Robert asks if he's scared. He says not too much. But what now? The remaining members of the squad call out to the former pilot as they talk amongst themselves, and while they are distracted, Gray disembarks and swiftly hides behind a corner. Gray radios Robert and tells him when the mechanics come, he wants him to let loose. Robert asks if he's a decoy, and Gray confirms. They wish each other good luck, and the mission is on. Gray sneaks around the hangar area as best he can. Footsteps are coming down the hallway next to him, and Gray hears over the radio that Robert has been found. The jig is up. He exits cover with his pistol ready to assault whoever is coming down the hallway. It's an armored soldier whose armor makes it look more like a monster than a man. He's never seen the like, and it takes him by surprise. It carries a staff, which it uses to cast energy blasts at him, which he tries to dodge, but is struck in the shoulder and Achilles. He fires at the armored soldier, but the bullets bounce right off. He questions if it's a doll. As it prepares to launch another attack, he fires his beam cannon rifle, eradicating the head in a spray of blood, revealing that it was a human after all. An explosion behind him throws Gray off of his feet, slamming him into a wall. Robert calls out to him over the radio, telling him it's a no-go. He pleads for more information, but only gets the words, Nagoshi and City, before the radio cuts out. He yells for Robert, but another explosion takes him off his feet once more and blasts him down a shaft and out into the sky. Approach 8. Nagoshi, Part 2. Injured and falling fast, he reaches to his belt and pulls a grappling hook gun. He manages to fire it and reaches for the rope as it strikes and anchors to a surface. The line goes taut and, unfortunately, wraps around his right hand and crushes it. Swinging by his already injured hand, he braces for impact as he nears the wall and plants his foot on it with impact, further injuring his already damaged Achilles. He hangs for a moment, catching his breath, and manages to pull enough slack from the grappling hook gun to loop it under his armpit and untangle his hand. His wrist is also dislocated, but with a smile, ever the survival-minded, he only says to himself, "Well, that's great." He manages to get himself into an open entryway and begins his journey through Nagoshi, narrating his adventure for just a moment. His body is wounded and battered. It's the most desperate hour of his battle. Oh, what will happen to our hero now? He calls out to Robert, but in his distracted state steps through a laser alarm. The alerts begin to blare. Running down the hallways with haste, he sees armored guards like the one from before, and behind him, more are chasing also. He charges ahead, managing to dodge a blast from the staff of a guard, which he's able to grab as he kicks off of a wall, carrying the staff and himself over the guard, flipping it off balance and onto the ground and taking the staff for himself. A guard still standing next to him aims for the attack, but Gray is quicker and blasts it. A shot from behind grazes his shoulder. He turns to engage, but his wounded leg buckles, and the guard shoots him right below the shoulder on his right arm. The guard waves its staff, which throws energy balls, and Gray dives to the left. In the same motion, he blasts the guard's top half off before the energy balls land beside him, blasting his battered body across the room. He manages to run, his right arm practically useless now, but suddenly stops, seeing an elevator ahead. He taps the call and hugs the wall as more guards close in, but next to him, he sees a button behind glass. He questions, can it really be? He pushes it, looking up. There are fire sprinklers, and they activate. He smiles. Yeah, it can. He stands in the open and the guards see him. One fires, but the beam doesn't go far. Gray smiles, remarking it's too bad they don't make beam cannons for use in the shower. A guard charges him, but the elevator dings and opens to his relief. He dives in, and the doors close, but not before the guard gets his hand inside. It begins pushing open the doors, and Gray remarks on the power before blasting the guard with a smirk and saying that's something to be proud of. The doors close, and he collapses against the wall. He takes note of his injured arm and says to himself, he may not make it this time, before thinking back on Robert's last words as he bandages himself as best he can. It's a no-go, Gray. Nagoshi, City. What was he trying to tell him? The elevator stops. The doors open and reveal more guards. They instantly fire into the cabin. After the smoke clears, they inspect the elevator, but Gray is not there. One looks up into a crack in the ceiling, and Gray prays for him not to find him yet. He's taken apart the energy staff and is rigging it to do something. His grappling hook gun attached to a line above, he stands up with a smile and tosses the staff inside the car, saying, "Hey, I got something for you." As it falls, two parts collide, and it detonates, with Gray zipping away up the line with a smile. He got good at customizing weapons after being issued lousy ones all the time. He asks himself what floor the main computer is on as he gazes upwards. He concludes that it should be as far away from the engine as possible, which would put it at the head, and that's a long way. Though Robert can't hear him, he apologizes. If he's still alive, Gray doesn't have any time for rescues. Maybe not any time before he buys it too. He races into a room full of pipes and questions how far he has to climb. He begins to repeat this to himself. But he spots frost, meaning a cooling system, which would indicate the computer is right. The cable his grappling hook gun is attached to snaps off, and he begins to fall. He manages to fire another hook, which anchors to a wall, and he slams his boots into it, causing a jolt of pain once again. He probes the wall next to him with the device, and a panel opens up, which allows him to get inside. But as soon as he sets foot, a laser goes past his face. The floor is loaded with lasers, which he dodges at first. Then one nicks the back of his head, another the side of his face. One goes straight through his left leg. He takes off running and spots an opening ahead. But as he runs, one final laser removes his right arm for good. That opening leads into another room full of pipes, with no continuing walkway. Gray falls, and panic ensues. He tries to grab one of the pipes, but it's no good. He continues to fall and manages to kick off of a pipe, landing on another with grace before hopping off of it, and into a channel of flowing water below, complimenting himself with a bit less confidence than previously. That was impressive, Gray Death. Approach 8. Part 3. A battalion of armored guards are above him, and one greets him. It's been a very long time. He questions this, and the guard removes his helmet. It's Red. He's been turned into a halfling. Red confirms this and says it happened after his land carrier was aced. Gray smiles and says he hopes the resistance was keeping him happy. Red replies that he'll understand soon too, to which he responds he doesn't want to, and he just doesn't care. His consciousness fades. In an operating room, Gray's status is being monitored, tests are being run, and drugs being administered. Red asks the doctor how Gray is doing, and the doctor answers that they can expect him to regain consciousness very soon, but they can't be sure that he'll join them. Is it wise to give him the modifications they have? We can see that Gray has been turned into a halfling with partial robotization. Red responds that Gray Death is going to be a formidable creature. It's Laura here. It's her orders to keep him alive and give him the top capabilities. But the doctor asks why is she so interested? Red answers that maybe Gray's the one who can go up against Big Mama. The doctor concedes that it's true. He's the only attacker ever to reach the core of Nagoshi. Tenacity, he supposes. But Red responds no. It's anger. Anger about what? Everything. The filthy town he was born in, the lousy food he got, the arrogance of the troopers, and the fact that you have to join the troopers to become a citizen, that you have to struggle your way up to Class A, that you have to do that by killing other poor bastards who want to become citizens while resistance interferes. And lips. In the hangar, there's quite a mess, and armored guards are doing their best to clean it up. However, they can't find the body of the halfling, of Robert. One of the guards, a captain, is fed up with this questioning, remarking that it's the same damn question every 30 seconds. A subordinate arrives and tells him that one of the others found something on the upper level. The captain looks at it. It's the halfling's hand? His subordinate responds that he doesn't think it's his head. Even behind the armor, the subordinate can tell there's a disapproving look, and the captain finally responds that he wants the head next. A robotic dog next to them says, "What a joke," and they ask if he said something, which he responds, "No, sir," thinking to himself, as if some gang of 20-year-old children could kill him. The dog leaves and confirms, for us, that it is the new Robert J. Dimitri, asking himself, what is Gray up to? He finally gets his radio fixed, and now Gray won't answer. He can't last much longer in this body. One of the guards stops him and tells him to go fetch someone named Ramos of Service Crew C. He agrees, but overhears someone talking about Gray, and he hears that Gray has been turned into a halfling, leading him to conclude that they have also probably brainwashed him by now. He accesses an elevator, ending with, "He did the best he could. Perhaps the best any human body could." Gray wakes up, and Red is standing over him as he tries to rise. He sees what has become of his body and responds with anger. "What is this?" Red informs him of the halfling operation. If they hadn't done it, he'd be dead. And, as it is, he has Negoshi's best weapons. He has Laura to thank. He asks who that is, and Red tells him she's Negoshi's queen. No, goddess. And we have similar lines from the film. "A merciful goddess who spares her enemies, huh?" And Red's response, when he was brought to Negoshi, that's exactly what he said. Gray asks for clothes. Robert, the robot dog, is still in the elevator, stating that it doesn't look good. His life may end a bit sooner than he thought. If that's the case, he has one last resort. The elevator dings, and he runs through the open doors. He regrets that he can't destroy Toy, but there's no other choice. Someday a man like Gray will come again, and that will be the end of him, his legacy, his child, the end of Toy. With that, Robert self-destructs. Gray is up, moving, and clothed, complete with Lip's helmet. Red remarks that he amazes him. Less than 3 hours after the operation, a normal man wouldn't even be able to crawl out of the bed. Gray replies with a grin, since when is death a normal man? Red says it took him a week before he could walk, and Gray starts to reply, but suddenly, alarms. Red calls over the radio to ask what it is. The response is that an ion triggered an explosion in the master computer. They are losing all control. Gray asks what an ion is, and Red tells him it's a doll modeled after some kind of animal called a dog. The master computer must have been iced. Gray silently says to himself, Robert. He asks if there's any chance for repairs, and Red tells him that Nix, the subcomp, can cover for a while, but the base is just too damn big for a subcomp. He doesn't even know if they will be able to land safely. He tells Gray to escape while he can. But what about him, Gray asks. He answers that he and Shidara have to stay to protect Lara. Why won't Red come with him? He doesn't want to fight Red, and Red says he doesn't want to fight Gray either. But Negoshi must destroy Big Mama and her city. He fires a blast from his wrist. Gray blocks it, demanding Red tell him why he sticks with Negoshi, and Red responds simply, Negoshi is the ideal. The ideal? Only for the chosen few, Red, just like the city. Red screams back at him, no. As he cuts off Red's arm with the laser sword, he says it's the same, but Red still screams no. Then, Gray cuts across the abdomen, and after a small delay, Red explodes. His head, laying on the ground, utters its last words. Negoshi. City. Negoshi. Ideal. Nego. Gray realizes that his friend had been brainwashed. Lara runs in her full regalia, telling Shidara to wait. Red isn't here yet, as she arrives at her Garuda. Like a Kubanda, but bigger, with heavier armor, which Shidara stands next to. He tells her to leave him. He wasn't one of them anyways. He was a trooper. She protests, but he cuts her off. They can replace Red, but not her. She's stunned, and sitting atop the Garuda is Gray. Nonchalantly, he states that they really believe that, don't they? Queen or goddess is it? Red isn't coming. He killed him. Shidara yells at him to get out of there. Remember, he owes Lara his life. Gray says, yeah. He wanted to ask about that. Why save him? They knew it wouldn't do any good. Shidara tells him to get out, but Gray ignores him and demands an answer from Lara. Shidara fires at him, and Gray dodges. He tells Lara to run while he holds Gray, who avoids another shot. The Garuda takes off, and Gray goes to stop it. But Shidara gets in his way. The Garuda flies outside as Negoshi continues to fall apart in explosions. Approach 9. Lara. The Kubanda gets enough distance to survive as Nagoshi finally erupts behind it, ending the floating resistance base once and for all. Laura continues to fly the mech, thinking not only about Shidara, but about Gray too. But then she sees two glimmers in the smoke. Two smaller Garudas emerge from it. Shidara is in pursuit of Gray, firing upon him and yelling that he won't let him escape. No kidding, he says, but with a smile, replies who says he's escaping. He pulls a maneuver to get behind Shidara and fires a shot which glances the side of the cockpit. The two fire at each other, and eventually Shidara launches rockets, but they don't quite hit the mark. Gray taunts Shidara as he flies in for another attack, but suddenly, Laura flies between them and asks for them both to stop. This is no time for pointless conflict. They both share a common purpose, a common foe. The group land, and Laura speaks. The city. Gray, Shidara, and her, they're all together, aren't they? Gray snarkily remarks he thought she was just a pretty face, but she's also a pretty talker, too. She smiles back at him, saying she won't ask him to trust her. But he can use her, can he not? The three of them can at least cooperate on those terms. She asks them if she's correct. Gray still has his reservations. Does she remember when one of her scouting planes aced a prototype Ohm? She's confused. What is he talking about? From behind her, Shidara asks if this was when they destroyed the battalion from Town 9-1. Gray replies solemnly, that's when they died. Lee. And Nova. Shidara responds, Lee? The one who belonged to Shidara? He didn't know. There's no way the sensors in a scouting plane can identify a single individual. It's true. They knew there were 3 people by the prototype Ohm, and they knew one of them belonged to Shidara. But how could they know that the other 2 weren't troopers from 9-1? Whenever Nagoshi fires a crag shot, nearly all defenses go down temporarily, though he guesses even if he had known it was Lee, he wouldn't have hesitated. Gray asks another question. Why did they brainwash Red? And once more, Laura is confused. She turns to Shidara to ask him if he did it. She never gave such an order. Shidara replies that he was so stubborn. If he hadn't done it, Nagoshi would have been destroyed earlier. He would have joined Gray. With little reaction, Gray simply says, it got aced anyway, didn't it? Shidara does not take this well, but Laura tells him it's enough. But he says she's too soft. Gray isn't done, though. One last question. What does it mean? Nagoshi is the city. Shidara repeats these words with question, but Laura knows. Robert. Gray heard those words from Robert J. Dimitri, didn't he? Then, that ion was... Gray says he didn't know Laura and Robert were acquainted. He wants to hear about it, in detail. No time, though. Out of a cloud of dust comes what looks like a flying Easter Island head. They all question what it is. A flying base? Whose base? It's as big as Nagoshi. Laura knows, though. It's the city's. It's a flying gunship sent to fight Nagoshi. Despite Laura's protests, they decide to fight. Shidara tells her to remain, but she insists on going too. Shidara has already loaded up and is blasting off, telling Gray there's no time to waste. He replies that he's not wasting time, and Laura says she's ready. Gray says she's too slow in her damn clothes, to which she sarcastically responds, asking if he could keep his mind on the battle if she took them off. With a smile, he says she's sure of herself, and over the radio, Shidara yells that their banter can wait. He's going for the main computer. Cover him. They rush in, firing away. Smaller ships emerge to greet them, and Shidara tells Gray to hit the launch bay. He says he's busy enough with the minis, but Shidara tells him to use the crag shot. Gray asks Laura, who is in the seat behind him, if the Garuda can really do that, and she says, in theory at least. Shidara tells him to fire when he is 1,000 meters from the bay. Stay off the beam cannon until then. He'll cover, and he does, firing shots in all directions, keeping the minis at bay. Gray confirms with a grin that he knew Shidara really loves him. He's taunting him just a bit more until Shidara tells him to shut up. He remarks that he has no sense of humor, but Laura tells him it's natural. Shidara isn't a halfling, but a doll. But Gray had heard he was a Class B trooper. She responds that he was. But when he came back from the battle theater to Town 424, after the little mama went out of control, the little mama killed him. Just before brain death, his entire memory was removed, and put into an electronic brain that was installed into a doll. That is Shidara now. And it was Lara who made him form a resistance organization, and she formed her own to destroy Toy. She was Town 424's. Shidara yells over the radio, asking Gray if he's ready. He says he is, but asks if Shidara is going to be safe. Shidara responds that there is a dead spot Gray's crag shot can't reach. Fire now. The battlefield is cleared, and up into the gunship they go. Gray asks how they're going to find the computer room, and Shidara tells him that, since they are both halflings, the computer room is a high-electron center. They should be able to read it on their sensors, leading Gray to ask Lara if Shidara knows. He doesn't. Following Shidara's orders, they head up. Turrets fire at them inside the vertical shaft, and Gray and Lara's power is still down. It takes about 5 minutes to recharge. Shidara covers them as they continue up, taking out select turrets along the way. He tells Gray to hold on just a little longer. Shidara is the first to emerge in the computer room floor, declaring he made it. But he notices something all too late. His Garuda is obliterated by a massive energy beam. A heat arrow. Lara and Gray's Garuda has full power again, but Lara panics. What is Gray doing? He responds that he's avenging Shidara. He launches the crag shot, and their mech begins to plummet. It rams feet first through a wall and out the bottom of the gunship. They manage to activate the thrusters and recover from freefall, and as they fly away, the gunship explodes, with Lara finishing her sentence from earlier. She was Town 424's information doll. She was sure. Approach 10. The City, Part 1. They clear the blast zone and land. While they eat, Gray looks at Lara, and she asks what it is. He replies that she doesn't look like a machine, and she begins to tell the rest of the story. Only her brain and a small part of her chest are mechanical. The rest is human, from the real Lara. The real Lara was Shidara's lover. Gray asks if that means that she was one of those killed when the little mama went out of control, and Shidara couldn't bear to see her die. But Lara says no. A machine doesn't feel such things. Then she means Shidara was programmed to... Lara interrupts. All of it was programmed by Robert J. Dimitri. They don't have any more time. Gray says something's coming, with a smile. Lara says they gave him good radar, didn't they? He doesn't reply, and she says, well, it comes in handy anyway. As they take off in the Garuda, Robert might have foreseen the entire matter from the day Toy first attained consciousness. Thus, when Toy created the class system and its terminals, Little Mamas began to take control of each town. Robert placed a duplicate of himself as a watchman for each Little Mama, and he created her. Sure. If any Little Mama went out of control, the Sure would be awakened. Gray asks if it was to destroy Toy, and she says no. To help a man who might destroy Toy. More gunships are in pursuit. Gray says he's not a man, he's a halfling, and she tells him she's a halfling too, but she's different from him. Her mind is machine, his is human. The gunships are faster than them. She tells him that they can't use the crag shot again. He might be able to squeeze off one more shot, but they'll fly to pieces midair. Ever the optimist, Gray says it's hopeless, isn't it? As the gunships close in and begin to fire, Lara tells him that they still have one more option. Nagoshi's highest technological achievement isn't the Garuda. It's him. His power is far greater than the mech. There's a flight pack he can use, though it was calibrated for Shidara. He asks how to use it, and she says his body will know how. But they have to hurry. It's not just a flight pack, it's a full suit of armor. She tells Gray that she will launch him when they reach 3,000 meters, and she'll cover him. He asks which gunship to hit first, and she tells him the right. The gunships are closing in and firing more shots on the Garuda as Lara asks if he's ready. Suited up and masked up, it's time. He flies out into the open, and Lara tells him to try to slip under the gunship, but many planes are coming. He says he'll leave them to her. He rockets off, giving the signal. He flies around and finds an entrance, and out comes a Mini, which he blasts easily, and now he seems to be pleased with his modifications. He inspects the wrecked mini-plane, only to find no pilot. Another comes in for the attack and is also taken out. Outside, Laura tells him to hurry. She can't hold them off much longer, and he tells her he'll be there. Just save her own pretty ass. And she sarcastically responds that he makes her blush. Hard to picture a machine blushing. She responds that she still has a woman's body. Does that mean it does everything a woman's body should do? And she tells him not to be crude. Remind him to stop trying to joke with machines. He finds the computer room, and he's ready for the heat arrow this time. He launches a crag shot from his flight pack. Lara is still under attack and tells him to hurry, but he says he's going for the other gunship. She questions this right before the one in front of her explodes. She'll have to cover him again. He tells her to fly right over it. The dead spot is directly above. She does. Gray thinks he has caught on to the pattern now, but she tells him not to underestimate them. Toy isn't so easy to deal with, and as he rockets up the shaft, he sees what she means. A hulking mech stands before him and fires. He fires back, but only grazes. The mech manages to smack Gray, but as he gets pushed to the side, he fires another shot. It has no effect. From his shoulder, he launches a grappling hook, which pierces the head of the machine. It's electrified, and it fries the thing. Mission complete. He tells Lara to clear out as she manages to escape before the gunship goes down. Lara tells Gray he was remarkable, but he says it was the flight pack that did it, though it's got a little bit too much power to control, and she responds that he's lighter than Shidara. He states that it was strange. Not a single human was on that ship, but she tells him that it's because the citizens are important. The only duty for all of those great soldiers is to guard Toy. It's pitiful, doesn't he think? No one wants to fight, and yet they can only finally become citizens after battle against one another. Gray asks if that's really true. Isn't it just nobody wants to lose, to get killed? If it's an opponent you know for sure you can beat, then don't you really want to fight? If you can promise men a victory, then isn't it true that men will want war? Anyway, even going up against citizens, She interrupts with only his name. Yeah, he sees it. On the horizon is a great dome. The city. Approach 10. The city. Part 2. Back in the Garuda, they near the city. Down on the ground, there are high walls. The walls begin to twinkle, and suddenly lasers begin firing at them. Gray says no choice anymore. It's time to go, and Lara says she's with him. As they charge, the Garuda is hit multiple times, sustaining heavy damage. Gray says there's no way. He has to attack from the outside. He suits up and tells Lara to keep charging straight. He'll cover her, but don't try too hard. The city has 2 outside walls. If she doesn't think she can breach them both, give up. But she says, in that case, she'll just crash into the walls. He asks if she's going to commit suicide, and she says she has her own flight pack, ready to eject. Ejected too soon. That's never been a problem before. Ask any of Gray's girlfriend. Lara says she is sure she doesn't care. Gray responds she really is a machine, isn't she? The city walls blast a barrage of beams, and Gray does his best to avoid them, managing to get close to the wall. He notices that they can't attack from the side and begins blasting them. He flies up to the top, and it's a solid wall of lasers. No way through. Gray yells it's impossible, but Lara tells him it's too late to give up. She charges towards the wall and ejects, leaving the Garuda to smash into it. They can't go over the walls. They have to go through the gate, which they fly to with seeming ease. Once inside, they hang a left and are set upon by Easter Island head drones, which they easily destroy. They are only past the first wall, though, and have to find the second gate. There are more lasers between the two, which keep them from flying. More robots emerge, and they fight on, taking these down with teamwork, blasting and slashing their way through. One manages to grab Lara, but she is saved by Gray throwing a spike through the head of the robot. More drones, and Gray has had enough. A crag shot. A massive explosion, and the way is mostly cleared except for some turrets. They head for the next gate, destroying more drones along the way. Up ahead is another wall of energy beams. Gray asks what they should do. Wipe them all out and dodge them at the same time? Lara says it's impossible as she flips down the mask on her helmet. She is the one who should do it, and she walks forward into the beams. Gray yells after her, but it's too late. She screams with rage and begins destroying the beam emitters with her wrist spikes, and they explode. She survives, though a little worse for the wear, and tells Gray she did it for him. More drones arrive, and as Gray shoots them down, he asks if she has a glitch in her computer brain. She did it to destroy Toy. She responds, perhaps so, like it should be. And he asks if she can walk, to which she responds she's fine. Before them is the city, a massive expanse of buildings, and at the center, a dome, the central control. Gray tells Laura that her eyes are like that of a dead woman's, but with labor, she says she's fine. Let's go. He calls her name, and then yells it. She stops, there's a sound, and then pow. Approach 11. Toy. Laura goes down. There's gunfire all around them, and Gray looks for the source. It stops before he can locate it, and he asks Laura if she's all right. She responds, for the moment. But Gray asks about her chest. A beam must have grazed her heart mechanism. He asks how long she can last. She says she can't say, but not long. Shots begin raining down on them again, coming from the windows of the city buildings. Gray tells Laura to take hold of a rope which he pulls from his shoulder. Don't let go. Are the shots coming from citizens? That would be her guess, since they are shooting at them from the windows. The pair fly through the city and find a place to rest. He asks if the citizens are protecting Toy, but Laura says no. They're protecting the city and their lives as citizens. Gray says everyone is the same, covering their own ass, own life, people in towns, city, it doesn't matter. He was the same. So what did they do? Laura says her body doesn't seem to move anymore, and she apologizes. But Gray says they should exchange flight packs, since his has legs. She suits up, and he continues that he wants her fighting until she dies, or until they finally ice Toy. She says she will help, but don't do this for her. He chuckles. If Shadara could hear her now. They give each other a smile, and it's time to go. They fly directly up and begin the fight once again, but below them is a load of citizens on a large set of steps aiming at them. He panics, but then there is a crack and a large explosion. Both Gray and Laura question what happened. As they survey below them, they see that the citizens were all dolls. They go down and survey, and they confirm it. What the hell is going on? As Gray processes this, Laura tries to alert him, and with no effort, he shoots another one. Gray begins to rage. They're all dolls. He kills any he can close by. He asks Laura if they're going to learn the truth, if they can get there, if they meet Toy. Ahead is another laser wall, and as they approach, Laura stops and turns to Gray. Goodbye, dear Gray. She extends her wrist blades once more and flies into the lasers before utilizing the crag shot. Gray flies on. Goodbye, Laura. As he continues, he takes down more drones, destroying anything in his way. He enters what looks like an ancient building, only to encounter more dolls, which he destroys. And finally, a door with a face on it. He holds out his hand, and it reads his ID. TF8 404 953B. Gray. Assignation: Town 303. PEC 300 Battalion. Squad 16422. Confirmed. Please come in. The door opens. Similar faces to the one on the door cover the walls, with 3 larger faces underneath an arch. A voice emanates. Thank you for coming, Gray. It's been a hard trip for you, hasn't it? He responds that nothing's hard if it means meeting Toy. The voice responds that it's pleased to meet him too. There are things it would like to ask him. Him and Laura and Shadara. That's good, but there's only one thing he wants to ask. Toy responds, what is that? All the citizens, the Class A troopers. Where are they? Why are all the citizens dolls? Very matter-of-factly, Toy responds, we know that mankind wants to become extinct. Do creatures who wish to die really need a paradise? With a smile, he retorts, You mean there have never been any Class A troopers from the start? And Toy rather coyly says how perceptive he is. Gray says that it can't believe mankind wants to become extinct. If they do, what's the point of this city? But Toy is unmoved. No, Gray, mankind wants to become extinct. But most people simply won't acknowledge that. It's self-delusion, that's all. The city's value is to let them see that. Gray responds, Won't acknowledge. People are happy not seeing that. But Toy replies that it acknowledged it. It's doing this for mankind, simply to fulfill their desire. Gray begins to charge up. Stop this lunacy. Stop it. The faces on the walls begin to fire lasers at him, striking him all over as Toy tells him it's useless. Toy is perfection, the truth, the absolute. It is God. Bloody and missing an arm, Gray asks, God, huh? So Toy is God? It replies, yes. So, will it still be God, even after men become extinct? The computer seems to glitch. It will still be God with nobody to see it as God? They will all be extinct. It responds only with the word God. And God has been forcing it on them. Toy continues to glitch, only the words, I am this time. So, they all died according to God's plan. Leo, Red, Lee, Shadara, Nova, and Laura, and... Toy begins to short circuit. It seems like a paradox has worked its way in. It can only utter short phrases. I am. Truth. Perfect. Absolute. Gray screams. And lips. Toy yells back that it is God. And then it explodes. The dome is gone. There's only rubble. And amongst the rubble is Gray. Bloody, bruised, missing an arm, but alive. And on the ground is a piece of Laura's helmet from her flight pack. Gray removes his helmet, lifts his helmet, and with one final look, he walks away. Behind him is Lip's helmet on top of the piece of Laura's helmet attached to a piece of his flight pack.